Hey, what's up? It's Cute What If this side. Today we will be seeing, what if Deku had Kitsune Quirk? Now before we move ahead with the fic, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for future what ifs like this. In this bizarre world of quirks, anything is possible. Whether it's the destruction of mankind or the creation of a peaceful utopia, all have the possibility of happening based on one small decision. Words couldn't even describe how jarring it was that the world could be shaped in such a way where millions if not billions of choices are made a day, and many of them have little significance in making the world turn. But every once in a while, a decision is made that may at first seem small, but actually change the wheels of history forever. Who would have thought one of those moments would happen because of a pair of fox ears? Izuku Midoriya was a strange case. The day he was born was eventful. It began when his mom went into LBR much sooner than doctors expected, sending everyone into a panic. To make things stranger, during LBR the unborn boy was flailing the entire time. It was as if a wild beast was fighting to be free from the cage that had imprisoned him for so long. Or, as Inko Midoriya described it, who the FCK put a headless chicken in my womb. The doctors rushed to get her situated both out of worry of the baby's strange behavior, and because Inko, in her LBR pains, threatened the doctors with such a wide variety of words that would surprise even linguists. Despite not being born yet, the boy kept up this amount of ferocity, until he was delivered, whereafter he immediately calmed. Beside the green hair that he had inherited from his mother, he was also born with unnaturally sharp canines, nails, and thin marks that looked like whiskers on the very side of his face. At the time, it was passed off as a part of his quirk, since it wasn't unusual for some children to have their quirk manifest or partially manifest at BRTH, seeing as the first official quirk-bearing person was a baby that was barely a few hours old. As a precaution, the head doctor requested that Inko and her newly born son stay at the hospital for a few extra days, just to make sure everything was okay. Midoriya's dad, despite frequent travel for work, stayed with his family the entire time they were there. Once the hospital released the mother and her baby, they continued to live a considerably normal life. Hisashi Midoriya went back to his business travels and Inko raised their son. There was little concern about their baby's body, as they expected it was going to be connected to his quirk once he grew up, most likely taking traits from his father. Lo and behold, one day a few months after Izuku turned 3, something happened. Poof! Amoom! A young Izuku yelled from his room. The surprise in his voice triggered any mother's intuition. Her breath came in ragged gasps and her eyes were wide as she came rushing into the room. What, Izuku? I have 4 ears. He wasn't exaggerating either. He really did have 4 ears, 2 on each side of his head like any regular person and 2 more ears on top that didn't look human. They resembled the fox ears his father had, except they were still furless and were really small, meaning they probably weren't done growing out yet. With the relief of knowing her baby was alright, Inko passed out and fell to the ground, having drained herself from worrying about her baby. Unfortunately, Izuku at the time thought his fox ears were the reason his mom lost consciousness, because they freaked her out, and felt ashamed of his ears. Despite his mom's constant apologies and explanation, he kept his ears hidden from everyone with a hat he refused to take off for the next 9 weeks. That was the day his dad came home from his travels to visit, fully dressed with a hat and everything. After a quick talk with his wife, he knew he needed to have a chat with his son. Izuku, I'm back. The sound of rushing little feet echoed throughout the hall before the small child ran his way in front of his father to happily greet him. Daddy, you're back. Did you bring me any souvenirs? Of course, but we can save that for later. But I think you might have a surprise to show me. I do. Something that popped up on your head one day. It took a second for Izuku to get what he was referring to before the excited young boy quickly turned more shy and introverted, turning his head slightly away to avoid eye contact. There was uncertainty in his voice. I don't think you'll want to see them. Why not? Because you might faint like mommy. Hisashi chuckled a bit to himself before telling his son. Well, you know your mom, her heart is weak and it takes more effort to not scare than any person I've ever met. Hey, Inko exclaimed, blushing, feeling embarrassed that her presence was made out to look so frail despite how accurate it was. But she's strong-willed, he continued, at least strong enough to have given BRTH to you, and you were a strong rascal when you were being born. I was, Izuku asked, tilting his head. She practically went istic on everyone to get you out, that's how powerful you were. I've never seen your mom say such things that day. My favorite line was I don't care if you need to use a ladle to scoop that little F. Let's stay on topic. Inko shouted again, her face became redder than a tomato. That day will forever haunt her because of her actions. Clearing his throat, Hisashi told his son, point is, I'll be fine. Still, the boy was hesitant. I'm not sure, you promise you won't pass out. It was really scary when mommy did it. Only if you don't faint seeing mine. Removing his hat, Hisashi showed his son his fully grown fur-covered fox ears, wiggling them around a bit to show him that they were real. Such adorable things will awe any child who saw them. And Izuku was no exception. His dad was even kind enough to let him touch them for fun. Only if Izuku promised to show him his own right after. Finally building the confidence to do so, Izuku lowered his head toward his dad so he could get a better look, removing his own small hat to reveal his small, furless, still maturing ears. Silence filled the room as Izuku braced himself for his father's reaction. He feared that he would have the same reaction as his mother. Would his father faint or be frightened by his ears as well? Was he actually a freak of nature with his appearance? These were the questions that plagued such a little mind. But those chilling thoughts melted away when he felt a warm hand settle on his head and heard his father's voice. "They're fine." Letting out a gasp of relief, Izuku felt secure about himself. "Oh hey, I see a bit of fur on one of them. That's pretty cute," his father said as he began softly rubbing the ear he mentioned, causing the young child to begin squirming. "Stop," the boy begged. His ears were still too sensitive. Having had enough fun messing with his son and seeing as the results made his mother smile, the father patted him once more before giving him some words of advice. "You are both a kind soul and a powerful person, Izuku Midoriya. Never forget that and never be ashamed of your body, especially of those ears of yours." Hisashi's inspiring message, one that would spark Izuku's ambition to become a hero, was quickly followed by Izuku turning around and pulling down his brief to show a tiny hairless tail he had as well. "What about this?" Izuku asked. "This popped out like a week ago." Hisashi had nothing to say. He hadn't been prepared for that as he had only been told about the ears and assumed if a tail showed up he would have been told so, as it would be pretty strong to miss. Inko wasn't expecting that either and fainted again from the shock and suddenness of it all. "Honey." "Oh no, Mom. I did it again." Don't worry son, she'll be fine." She fainted when she first saw mine as well. A heartwarming little family moment together. That was the last time Izuku would physically see his father. As usual, he would be gone for a long period of time, with Izuku's only chance of seeing him being by phone and video calls. When Izuku was a few weeks away from turning 5, Inko began to grow concerned about his growth. Izuku's tail and ears had barely grown at all since that day almost 2 years ago. They were still in the same unmatured state and had only grown just enough fur to cover them even then. The fur hadn't molted yet to the proper color. Only his whiskers kept their very thin shape. It was passable at first since he was young, but after some research on fox growth she found out that this was pretty abnormal. Usually, it took 4 weeks for just about everything to set in, not over 2 years. Even his father, who was a self-proclaimed late bloomer, only took 5.5 weeks to grow his mature coat. After some debate, she finally took him to the hospital to have him checked out. It was good timing, as she had a second concern she was worried about. "Nope, not happening. The kid is quirkless." Shocking news to a kid who wanted to become a hero. But how can that be? Inko asked the doctor with a concerned face. "His ears, his claws, the whiskers, and the tail. I don't know what to tell you, but all I know is that his biology says he's quirkless." The doctor took the time to explain to them medically how a hospital can determine whether someone has a quirk or not. "My guess is, your son's fox-like features are a result of some recessive genes in his DNA that have been mutated because of the quirks of the parents. It has happened before. It's how we got people with unique body features and hair colors without it being related to their quirks, and in some cases they were quirkless. Though I've never encountered an occurrence this rare, I assume he got it from his father. How have they been functioning for him?" The doctor shifted in his chair as he got a bit more interested in the subject. "That's actually the other reason why I came. He's been displaying little to no signs of activity in either of those parts. He can barely hear through his fox ears, and any sound he does hear through them usually ends up as incomprehensible sounds that hurt his head, so I had to get him earplugs. He can't even wriggle them. He has no control over his claws, can't wag his tail, and his sense of smell didn't get better." "Were these all traits your husband had?" "Yes. He had all those things on top of his ability to spit fire. Combined with my ability to bring small objects toward me, I always thought his fox traits would only be secondary, much less this. Is there anything we can do?" "That's the thing, ma'am. There are still many things we don't know about how quirk will affect the human body. From what I can see, your son has a bunch of fox body parts that he can't use because of how neurology works. In simple terms, his brain is unable to properly send messages to the nerves in those parts. I'm still unsure why, but him being born early the way he was could have probably had something to do with it. We can do something about his claws, but everything else we can't do much about without strapping him to a test table." Just like that, any dream of him being a hero, much less a normal person, was crushed in one cruel twist of fate. His father stopped calling the family completely a few months later. Izuku stopped being proud of his ears and began to hide them again soon after. By age 6, the stress was causing his mom to gain weight and strangely decrease in size. At age 8, Izuku's mother began having health problems. And at age 10 he found out what was the cause and it shook him to his core. It's tragic how quickly a life can be seen as cursed. One moment the day is as bright as the shining heavens above, and then the next it's a never-ending nightmare. A kind of nightmare where anyone would be willing to do anything to help them escape their hardships. That wasn't an option for Izuku as his curse was something he could never escape, especially with the never-ending reminder that was Izuku's fox ears. In situations like these, it seems almost certain that destiny had chosen the boy's path, and there was nothing he could do about it. With no hope, he can only look up at the moon floating in the sky, still shining brightly throughout the vastness of the night, and pray for good fortune. Only the saving grace of a miracle can save the boy from his fate, of good luck to change the wheels of fate. On the night of a full moon, a young fox boy was in his room, staring up at the moonlit sky a few minutes before he had to go to bed. Among the many stars that floated in the sky, the boy's eyes were always drawn to the moon. He remembered a story his mom told him about how if you look carefully at the moon, you can spot a cute animal of some kind standing on a pot, P&D something. The exact details were hazy to him. He doesn't even remember what the animal was supposed to be or why it was P&D into a random pot on the moon. All he knew was that he liked its ears. Whatever it was, if it can make its way to the moon and become a legend, then it has to be magical, or at least special, something that can perform a miracle. Looking at the moon with innocent eyes, holding a memento from his father, the boy made a silent prayer. Please, cute creature on the moon, bring me some good luck. Years passed and before Izuku Midoriya knew it, he was 13. Many things have changed. His mom was no longer the tall, slender, man-catcher that she once was. Life hadn't been so grateful to her. She has yet to find out what happened to her husband or if he was even still alive, and suddenly becoming a single mom took a toll on her health as the years dragged on. Then there was the situation with Izuku still hid his ears and tail from everyone, mostly through clever clothing choices. Makeup helped cover up his face whiskers. For his tail, he tied it to his back with a belt, as he didn't want to go through the painful process of sitting on it all day during school. It's SCK that despite not being able to move his fox parts he can still feel pain from them. He had to get more tricky for his ears, purposely growing out his hair to cover most of the base, and then tying down his ear with string so he can brush his hair over it. The last thing he hid was a black fox tail, a souvenir from the day his father saw his fox ears for the first time. Now it's a memento and the only thing he had to remind him of his dad. He had worn it in a couple of different ways, first trying to be discreet by using it as a phone decoration, then as a keychain, and finally an earpiece. After those failed because they obviously did the opposite of his goal, he settled on making it a bracelet that he would occasionally wear on during a test for good luck. During a test is the only time he was certain no one would pay attention to him, so he found it safe to keep his memento out. The only people who would naturally see his hidden parts were the ones he lived with, like his mother, since the boy's awareness slipped the most around her, though usually by accident, and it resulted in Izuku hiding in his room all day. He never wanted his mom to see his fox side again, not after overhearing something he wasn't meant to hear. He truly wished he hadn't heard what he had heard that day. He already heard a lot because of the cruel and unforgiving hell on earth that is school. Of course, the lie Co told his school was that Izuku had an undeveloped fox quirk, to explain why he had a fox boy's appearance and yet none of the capabilities of a fox. While at first, when he was 3, having something that can be taken as a quirk being manifested so early in life made him easily accepted and popular among his peers. When everyone else's quirk began manifesting fully and his quirk remained undeveloped years after, the ridicule began. At first, it was one specific person making a few harmless cracks about him, then a couple of kids joined in, and from there the inevitable spiral into a group of people cruelly mocking him began, calling him things like defective, half-baked, primitive beast, alpha test, beta dog, and pre-evolution trash. Luckily, most of it stopped as time went by, the only exception being the more delinquent students in his classes. As cruel as kids could be, all they knew was that he had an underdeveloped, weak quirk. It wasn't one he would be praised for, but since he wasn't known as quirkless he was no different from everyone else in society. He could blend into the endless waves of society without fear of being singled out if he wanted to. But the damage had already been done and yet no one knew it. It wasn't all bad. For one, Izuku's ears grew out a bit more and he could pick up more sound from them. Not that it meant he could understand anything he heard, but at least by the time he's hopefully 21 they'll look like regular fully grown fox ears. Speaking of regular fox ears, he managed to grow a decent amount of fur around them and they finally gained some color. Now they had a dark green look to them that was only a few shades lighter than his hair. They were as big or fluffy as they should have been, but at least it's something. His tail followed the same pattern as well, though it still doesn't have that signature fluff or length yet. The only thing that was semi-functional was his nails. While he can't naturally extend or retract it, but he can manually do it with a pair of pliers. It may be a painful process to go through to control a few nails, but now they became the easiest thing to hide, usually keeping them retracted. They were all essentially useless to have, except for his nails, but a dull box cutter was just as effective. If he was going to be stuck with them he may as well have it look normal. That's the best he can do, look normal. Look normal, in public. It's okay to seem like you're quirkless. If worse comes I'll just show them my teeth. He repeated these lines in his mind over and over again in his mind as he walked down the city streets from school. Even though no one on the streets would care about his appearance, seeing as a society of quirks give form to make different shapes and sizes, Izuku put an unwarranted amount of care in concealing himself, all to avoid the glares of people whose eyes aren't even focused on him. When we're unsure about ourselves, logic always seems to slip out of our minds. Izuku doesn't even realize that sometimes his intensive internal thoughts would leak into vocal mumbling nonsense. "Boy, stop your mumbling," shouted a very annoyed ash blonde. "What, is your mouth defective as well? Katsuki Bakugo was one of Midoriya's childhood friends. They've collectively been friends ever since they went to the same daycare when they were 3. What was truly shocking was when they all found out that their moms knew each other since high school. What were the odds? Like most kids, having mothers that were good friends meant that they got to see a lot more of each other. That was amplified after Midoriya's father disappeared, and Inko's health began to waver. The two spent a lot more time with each other as Mitsuki Bakugo, Katsuki's mom, came over to support Inko during those difficult times. Eventually, it happened so frequently that Mitsuki just had them move in with her family, and she didn't take no as an answer. Quite literally did she pack up their stuff for them. She also ordered the moving company and dragged his mom to their house by the wrist despite protest. After an extremely awkward explanation to the police, Inko relented and the Midoriyas moved in with the Bakugos. Being snapped out of his internal monologue, Izuku stammered with his words. What? You're mumbling, you're DMN mumbling. You're doing it again. Oh, I didn't. You've been doing that a lot lately, even at night when I'm trying to sleep. Like what the hell? Sorry. You better be. Geez, you're such an FC king bothersome Deku. Deku, someone who is worthless or can't do anything. A signature nickname given to him by his longtime friend sometime after they've lived under the same roof. First coming into fruition when one of their classmates pointed out how him having an underdeveloped fox quirk where he received the physical features, but can't use them was a pretty worthless thing to have. It didn't take long for Katsuki to start using the word Deku, mostly referring to how often he saw Izuku at home struggling to do nearly everything. The only exception was his studies, but even then Bakugo would get nagged at by his mom to help him study more. It wasn't Izuku's fault. It was around the time his ears became too big for his usual earplugs and started picking up more sound. It became difficult for him to pay attention in class. Every noise those cursive ears picked up became a P&D sound that echoed in his head. At one point it caused him to be sent to the nurse's office because the sound of the school bell brought him to the verge of tears once. He wasn't able to return to school till after he had custom earplugs made for his fox ears. That didn't help make him a fan of his ears anytime soon. He was lucky Bakugo was such a great note-taker, or else he would have easily fallen behind in class. How they get to the current status of their current relationship was a mystery to Izuku. They used to be the best of friends as children, but now they're like begrudging associates, with them growing further apart despite living under the same roof. Izuku can barely tell you a lot of personal things about Bakugo besides the few snippets he picked up from living with him, like his love for spicy food. It started around the time they were 7, about a year before Bakugo's mom persuasively invited them to her home. Bakugo was among the first of the kids who started making jokes about him. It was mostly lighthearted and didn't affect him any worse than when anyone ever mentions his fox ears. Then suddenly, as if he had a lifetime of pent-up hatred toward him, his remarks started becoming more cynical, and he repeatedly brought up how troublesome it was for him to deal with him and all issues, medical or otherwise. That was when the nickname Deku was slapped on by Katsuki, his personal branding mark to signify how he felt about Izuku's presence in his life. Being reminded of it always brought Deku to silence, considering his current feelings about his BRTH. I swear it's one thing after another with you. You'll probably forget your FC King head if it wasn't screwed on your shoulders. You remembered to take home your textbooks, right? We got that math test next week. You probably forgot, didn't you? Hey. Not getting an answer, Katsuki turned to his usual methods of getting Izuku's attention, pulling strong at his fox ears, knowing the pain would make it irresistible to ignore. It was easy for him to find even though Izuku has hidden them in his hair. He can probably pick out his ears with his eyes closed. Living with someone for so long will have that he didn't use too much force. To Izuku it felt like his ear was being tortured. Answer me already, dumbass. I don't want CRP from my mom if you fail. Why yes, I brought my books. Please let go, it hurts. Usually, he wasn't this rough with his ear when he just wanted his attention, but today was different. Katsuki was already in a bad mood due to an incident in school. It started when Midoriya got a little carried away this morning and went to go watch a hero stopping a villain despite already being late and heading to school, just because he wanted to collect a bit more notes about heroes in his handbook. If it wasn't for Katsuki finding him and dragging him to school by his neck collar while saying 99 reasons why he's the dumbest person he knows for his hero obsession, he would have been late to class. That was strike 1. Strike 2 came a bit later during class. Unfortunately, their teacher didn't bother obeying the note Izuku wrote and announced to the whole class that both Katsuki and he planned to attend UA High School after graduating. It sent Katsuki a stick. Izuku has yet to find out why, but for some reason, whenever Izuku's dream of becoming a hero gets brought up, the ash blonde takes great care in stomping the thought 6 feet deep with a raging fury. Izuku was lucky they were still in class at the moment, so all that happened was the usual fury of insults that the other class members joined in on, and purposely going through his bag to get the hero handbook he worked so strong on to blow it out the window. A little bit before school ended and the pair had to walk home, he quickly went to receive the book in secret and was lucky that the book was only lightly charred. At least then he had some saving grace from his enraged housemate, who finally relented and let go of his ear before scolding him a bit more. Next time listen. I'm sorry. That was when a small group of boys, friends that usually hang out with Katsuki, approached them. Hey Bakugo, what up? One of the boys asked. I see you're walking home the beta dog. How are his half-baked ears? As the boy reached to grab Izuku's already aching fox ears, he suddenly stopped dead cold mid-motion. For any bystander, this would seem strange, but Izuku knew if he looked to his side he'd know the answer. It was Bakugo. Right as his own friend was about to lay his hands on Izuku, Bakugo's red eyes gave him a steely cold look that froze his core. One that conveyed to the boy that it was probably best if he didn't go through with his actions if he knew what was good for him. Knowing he had control of the situation, he continued the conversation. The sound of his voice was in a tone that was chillingly between calm but aggressive. What do you want? Putting his hand down, the boy told him, we were about to head downtown to do something and wanted to see if you wanted to come with us. I'm down, oi dumbass. Katsuki called out to Izuku, even though he was right next to him. Guess he didn't want him to mishear anything. Get your defective butt straight home. No FC King Dieter's got it. Midoriya nodded, watching as his housemate walked off with his friends. He knew the importance of why Katsuki wanted him home so bad. It's because his mom said that between the time they leave the house for school until he comes back, Izuku was his responsibility. Once he gets home and one of their parents sees him, he won't be held accountable for what happens to him. Another unintentional weight Izuku's presence brought to his life that he's unwillingly dealing with. It was clear there was some disdain for him, but Izuku couldn't tell if Katsuki truly hated him or not. He was both the person who bullied him the most and the worst, but it's also because of him that he's his only real bully. It couldn't just be because of his parents ordering him to ensure his safety. Katsuki was the biggest danger of his life, having caused more bruises to him than anyone else he met. If he hated him so much, then why did he also prevent anyone from laying a finger on him? He's weird. The Bakugos in general are weird. Doing as he was told, Izuku walked home alone, but instead of taking the usual route home he would take with Katsuki, he took another way home. It was a street not far from his home he loved going through because it had an attraction he couldn't resist. Hirazu Street, the Street of Heroes. It was one of those streets that dedicated itself solely to one theme. You can find countless hero-themed stores, buildings, and merchandise here. While there are many other places in the city where one can get their hero fix, streets like these are where the nicest of things can be found for the most dedicated of fans. For someone like Izuku, this place was a goldmine. Technically, it wasn't a detour he was taking, as the street did lead him home. There was only a 10-ish minute difference between his regular route. The only reason he doesn't usually take it is because Katsuki would get sick of him stopping every 5 seconds to awe something he saw, turning an extra 10 minutes of walking into a 2-hour adventure, if they were lucky. Izuku was just too addicted to heroes, taking comfort and fawning over everything related to them and doing whatever he can to feel as if he's experiencing a taste of hero life. What else can he do about it? His dreams of being a hero, despite him pitifully telling himself that maybe one day he can, was virtually dead. If being quirkless wasn't already a red herring of being ineligible, having parts of his body that does nothing but damper his ability to do anything drove it in. Like his ears having super sensitive hearing, but everything is inaudible and hurts his ears, that only proves he wasn't meant to be a hero. Yet through it all, he kept telling himself maybe of good luck will come past him one day, and his destined life would change forever. Then he tripped, trampling on someone's leg before face-planting on the ground because life hasn't already made a lot of bad things happen to him today. Compared to everything else he dealt with today, this was pretty light. At least it couldn't get any worse. Kaboom! An explosion happened. Where did it come from? Izuku didn't know. His face was barely off the ground when it happened. All 4 of his ears were ringing from the explosion, and he couldn't see what was happening because a flash of light blinded him. All he felt was his weak body being forcefully carried off into the air. Was this his soul flying up to heaven? No, he felt gravity pulling his body toward the ground. He was still alive, but it might not be for long. He should come crashing to the ground any second now. If he's lucky, he'll make it out of it alive with a broken arm. Izuku braced himself for impact. But nothing happened. He never felt himself hit the ground, more like he's suspended in midair. Did he actually die? His mom would be devastated. Opening his eyes, he found himself looking below at rubble in the street caused by the attack. Now he was actually scared that he died because only birds and floating ghosts can look down at destruction like this. Hey, you okay, kid? He heard a vigorous but feminine voice say to him. With his vision returning, he looked up to find a dark-skinned young girl staring down at him. Sticking out from her flowing straight white hair was a pair of long white rabbit ears. If it wasn't for the fact that Izuku was still trying to comprehend what was happening, he would have been tempted to ask if he can pet them. He liked fluffy things. Gaining back some of his senses, he looked down to see that her left leg was wrapped around his waist, keeping him in air, while her other leg and arms held onto a street pole. They were about several feet off the ground. It amazed the fox boy seeing her hold him up like that in her position. Izuku thought to himself, wow, what an insane amount of leg strength she must have to be to carry me in the air with just her thigh. Using her left hand, the dark-skinned girl tilted around the fox boy's face. After giving him a quick check, she said out loud, "Yeah, you look fine. Lucky I was right next to you, huh?" She smiled, satisfied with herself because she knew if it wasn't for her powerful legs, this boy might have gotten seriously injured. Neither of them knew it yet, but this tiny encounter that can be chalked up to pure luck will forever change the current conditions of both their lives, and the course of destiny shifts ever so slightly, leading to new possibilities. The wheels of fate for two unexpected people have been altered and doors to new possibilities are opened. Your clothes might be a little scuffed, but at least you're not dead, right? The girl who saved him said as she looked down at him. She had striking red eyes, her confident smile was remarkable to look at, and her bunny ears looked so fluffy. Izuku couldn't think of anything to say. So much had happened in the short amount of time that he didn't know what to start with. Should he ask about the explosion? Who did it? Why? Who she was? If he could pet her ears? Or how her thighs are so strong? He couldn't make a decision and ended up just staring back at her with a dazed look. Seeing the funny look she was getting, the girl said, "You better not be one of those dumbasses who thinks it's the end of the world when your one pair of clothes gets ruined. At worst, it's one bad day. You can't let your life be defined by one bad day." Izuku continued to stare at her. This dark-skinned bunny girl intrigued him in so many ways, from her cute ears all the way down to her insanely strong legs. He didn't mind being given decent advice from the girl, even though they're not on the same subject, as she thinks he's silent because of his clothes when it's actually because the last 10 seconds of his life has been the most eventful it's been in years. Steer your own life. To me, as long as you have a sliver of it left, you can do something with it and make it count. The rabbit girl told him as she used her left hand to dust some dirt off him while sliding down the pole until her free foot touched the ground while her other legs were still wrapped around him. She turned her attention toward the direction of a rising smoke cloud, supposedly where the explosion came from. "How do you like that?" screamed a jagged voice out of the smoke. "I got a lot more where that came from if you want it. Who wants some? Come one, come all for a grand treat." Izuku couldn't see the man through the smoke, but judging by his demeanor, he was definitely a villain and the one who had caused the explosion. When the man started going on a long monologue about society, it became certain that he was a villain. As the man was monologuing, the rabbit-eared girl mumbled under her breath, "Ugh, I hate his kind. Talks too much," before looking down at Izuku. "Hey, if anyone asks, you mind saying you never saw my face?" she asked with a bright smile as she threw on the hood of her white jacket and then, without warning, she dropped him flat onto his back. His body jerked as he felt his full weight slam against his tail. Too distracted by the pain, Izuku only saw his white-haired savior walking off in the direction of the smoke out of the corner of his eye, and from there, he only heard what happened next. "You wanna try me, you little bunny?" "Yup. Huh. You fool, let's..." He never finished that sentence. The sudden gust of wind causes the smoke to flutter and twist, though not enough to dissipate it entirely. Over the whistling of the wind, Izuku could hear several thuds. The CC-kindness in the villain's voice quickly dropped as he shouted out, wait, nah FCK that. Oh, hold on. Stop, I didn't finish. Come here. Mercy." Wanting to see what was happening, Izuku quickly turned around, with the smoke dissipating only to see that the fight was practically over. The villain was already beaten with his hands over his head, shivering. Izuku had never seen a grown man on the ground crying like that before, and the girl wasn't done with him yet. She just kept kicking his helpless body while hurling insults at him with every kick. "Stupid mother FCker. You talk way too much. Yet you weren't SHT. And I'm not a DMN buddy." Once she made sure the emasculated villain wasn't going to move anymore, she stomped on his back as a humiliating sign of victory before stating, "You're lucky I can't stay or else I'd kick your butt 30 more times." Her ears perked up for a moment and then she dashed off, gone as quick as she had appeared. Speechless from what he had witnessed, the fox boy stayed seated with a grin of excitement. He didn't know who that girl with bunny ears was, but in the short minute since they had met, she had left an impression on him he wouldn't dare forget anytime soon. His body was still tingling with exhilaration. Despite missing all the action, simply hearing how she took down that villain in a matter of seconds brought thrills. Her having an animal mutation quirk made everything better as Izuku felt he could relate his condition with her. While his fox features weren't because of a quirk, it did give him a sliver of hope that someone with hybrid biology like him could still be strong. When the sound of footsteps started approaching him, Izuku thought that he would meet a policeman. He had been expecting it to happen since the explosion and was already committed to keeping his silent deal with the mystery bunny girl. Instead, he came face to face with Katsuki. His friend's eyes dilated as soon as he saw the state Izuku was in, and for a moment his face expressed concern. His voice quivered a bit as he spoke his name. "Izuku. Kaken." Izuku responded, stunned from both the Katsuki's unexpected arrival and from being referred to by his first name. Not even at home did he ever do that, always finding a way to go around it and secretly call him some mock name. The blonde paused for a moment, scanning Izuku up and down before asking, "Are you hurt? And no, can you stand?" he asked, hesitantly holding his arm out. "Yeah, I can," the fox boy replied, getting up on his feet with no problem. Oh, it was almost like a dream, seeing him sigh in relief. He was extremely fortunate to come out of that explosion with nothing more than grazing scratches, and he began to think that maybe his luck wasn't so bad. It's okay, Kaken, Izuku assured him. A villain attack happened here, but Izuku was stopped mid-sentence by a massive force that exploded against his abdomen, knocking the wind out of him and sending him flying into the nearby brick wall. His stomach was on fire from the pain, the aches caused his body to tremble, and he was left gasping on the floor. Through his blurry vision, Izuku managed to see Katsuki standing in front of him, his bold red eyes looking down at him with unbridled anger. As the enraged blonde stepped forward, he extended out his hand to the side, cracking each finger and causing tiny sparks to erupt from his palm that showed off his quirk. This was a new sensation of pain Izuku was feeling. He's been hit before and been hit harder by Katsuki on many different occasions, but never had it been this painful. As Katsuki stomped closer, he yelled, "What the ever-loving FCK is wrong with you?" Stunned by the sudden hit, Izuku couldn't speak, only propped himself up off the ground. "I told you, no detours, straight home. Why the FCK are you here?" Bakugo continued to yell at him through gritted teeth. Still shaken to his core from getting hit, Izuku stammered, I was just passing by to take a look and... UFC King degenerate, you think I was born yesterday. You didn't just pass by, you're here because of your DMN hero addiction. This is why I said straight home, but no, you and your god DMN heroes. I'm sick and tired of your FC King bullshit about heroes. Snapping his head to the side, Katsuki eyed the contents of Izuku's school bag that had been spilled on the ground from the explosion, spotting among them a specific book he remembered tossing earlier that day. The thing that helped foster Izuku's longing to be a hero, a single book most people would consider to just be a bunch of fan notes, and Katsuki's wrathful eyes began focusing his anger on that DMN book. With a new objective, the blonde marched his way over to what he had set his eyes upon. It took Izuku a confused second to wonder why Katsuki's explosive rage had suddenly been turned away from him, and upon realizing what was directed toward instead made his heart sink. Izuku stumbled to his feet, trying to protest against what he was going to do, but another, smaller explosion erupted in front of him, knocking him back to the cold ground. All of his ears were ringing again. He grunted from the P&D sound echoing inside of his head before trying to get back up again. This time he didn't even get to his knees before he was stopped again, a pair of red eyes glaring coldly at him like they had those kids from before, and Izuku suddenly felt the strength in his legs leave him. He was left there, with trembling hands and frightened eyes, as he had to witness what happened next. In a single motion, Katsuki swung his arm down to the ground, releasing an explosion bigger than either of the two he used against Izuku, and everything that was under his hand was obliterated. The notebook, the one Izuku had dedicated countless hours to, the one he took the punishment for being tardy to school for, the one he would go to as many villain attacks as possible to record in, and the thing that made him think he was doing anything toward his dream, was gone. Its once smooth white pages were now charred embers floating in the air, no different from the other smoldered objects that were in the area. Complete destruction, a favorite trademark of the blonde. "There, it's gone," shouted Katsuki, turning back to Izuku with the same cold glare as before. "No more of this CRP. Stop being a hero, you are not hero material and never will be. Your defective quirk is still underdeveloped at your age and causes more harm than good. You just have useless fox parts. You can't take care of yourself, you can't protect yourself, you probably don't even understand yourself, and you definitely don't understand your place in society, yet you still want to be a hero. If half your body doesn't even FC King work, then who the hell are you going to save?" As the words got to him, Izuku's efforts to get back up lessened, staying on the ground as he endured the verbal assault. "No one, that's who, so stop trying. You'll never save anyone, you won't even come close to helping anyone, you'll just get in the way and sit there like a baby like you are now. I'm the one who usually has to pick up after you, do you know how annoying that is? I quite literally cannot leave you alone to walk home so I can hang out with friends without you being stupid and getting yourself caught in something just to be saved by someone else. If you had listened to me for once, you would have been out of harm's way, but hey, you're not the one who'll get yelled at if something happens to you, right? That's probably why you don't have a bit of life perseverance, UFC King half-breed. I hate how much of an inconvenience you are to everyone around you. Every time it's one thing or another, do you not care about how your actions will affect others who are responsible for you? Probably not, you don't even care how much of a drag you are to your own mother." Izuku grabbed his own arms, his nails digging into his skin, almost puncturing it from the strength of his grip. "If you're going to live such a worthless and pathetic life, then go somewhere else and do it. At least that way no one will have to deal with your crappy existence." Silence encased the two boys after Katsuki's scolding, and only the sound of a vicious growl broke it. Looking up from his seated position, Izuku's green eyes were sharp as they stared back into Katsuki's red ones, and his face became vexed from the blonde's words. For a moment, he openly bared his sharp teeth, grinding them against each other, before standing straight on his feet, and showing Katsuki the full extent of his expression. His clenched fist shook from how angry he was. Then suddenly Izuku ran off, his head hanging low the entire way before disappearing down the street. Seeing him run off didn't surprise Katsuki. He took 3 steps in the direction Izuku ran off and before turning around. His eyes constantly furred between the two directions the street led before sighing to himself, "F-seeking idiot." He turned back the way he came and went to go rejoin his friends. Izuku didn't stop running until he reached an underpass, where he collapsed in the shade against a wall. His body was shaking. He hated what he was feeling at the moment, that special feeling of being a burden, the kind that makes one regret being born. People barely came this way, so it was a seclusive spot. It wasn't the first time he had been here in a similar situation. The first time was when he was 10 years old. He remembers that day too well. It was like every other night that day, during the time they were staying with the Bakugos. At the time, Izuku would be a bit laxer about his foxtail and ears at home, mostly due to the constant encouragement Mitsuki gave him. She would exaggerate her interest in his features and often fawned over them whenever a chance presented itself. It gave him some assurance about his body. Izuku's mom thought Izuku was asleep in the room they shared since it was late when actually, like most young children, he was staying up playing the new video game he got. At one point when Izuku took a short break to go to the bathroom, he knew he had a valid excuse if he was asked why he's awake. A voice coming from the kitchen caught his attention. More specifically, a line did. He didn't hear the entire conversation, but by some string of fate he understood just one part of it. "So Inko, what did the doctor say?" Curious about this, Izuku listened in, copying all the spy movies he watched and sneaking down the stairs quietly to listen. He had noticed some of his mother's health issues over the last 2 years but would never get a direct answer whenever any questions were asked. Now she went to the doctor and he didn't even know she had an appointment. Being kept in the dark about the situation was daunting to the child, and a golden opportunity to discover something just appeared. Of course, he was going to listen in. It went ... as expected. Mitsuki's voice could also be heard coming from the kitchen. Does that mean it was the scarring? Scarring? Izuku thought, is mommy hurt? I don't remember seeing her with a scar or getting hurt, except for a few times in the kitchen. Yes, it was. They said the internal scarring from my PRGNNCY was the cause of the pain and gave way for the infection. I'm guessing that means no more kids. They said the rate is extremely low if I tried. It's fine though, not like I had much of a plan to have another kid anyways. It was probably a blessing in disguise that we didn't try for a second kid. The doctor said if our second one also had those claws then my condition could have been fatal. I see. Well, don't worry about treatment. I can move around some stuff to help. And no, please, you've done enough for these last few years. Honestly, I'm more concerned about how to keep all this from Izuku. I already lied to him about how he was born. It's going to be more difficult hiding why I step. The room immediately went silent. A jarred-looking Inko would look to the entrance of the kitchen and see him looking back at her. Inko looked mortified seeing her son there, and Mitsuki had a shocked expression on her face as her lips mouthed the words "oh no." When a tear dropped off of his face, Izuku ran off with his mom calling out to him. The rest of his night was spent in the bathroom crying to himself. The next morning he tried running away from home. As the memories of the events that night reach a close, Izuku sighed, "Stupid Kaken. That BSDRD should really watch what he says once in a while. What would he do if I actually did run away from home?" His head collided with his knees as he felt mentally exhausted from the whole thing. He tried to keep the light of his thought as to not stress himself out too much. Though to my knowledge, I guess he doesn't know that night happened. He was asleep at the time and Mitsuki seemed respectful to my family's privacy. He doesn't even know that I'm quirkless and that my fox limbs are just a mutation. I'm terrified how he'll treat me if he ever finds out. Probably worse ... or maybe even better out of pity. No wonder he hates me. I hate me myself. I just burden everyone with my existence. Maybe I should just run away. Tears began streaming down his face again. He regretted being alive if his life was going to be a never-ending cycle of him leeching off of everyone around him. He clutched his chest, holding his father's memento through his shirt as he tried to be strong. He wished he could be what his dad said he was that day, but he's not. He'll never be anything more than defective. As the boy pondered on if he should run away or not, he felt something weird drip onto his shoulder. It was slimy as it dripped down, covering more and more of his body. Before he noticed how quickly this substance was spreading, his entire right arm was covered in it. When he looked up to see where the dripping was coming from, he was met with the horrifying sight of a green slime creature with a creepy face falling onto him. As the villainous creature continued to encapsulate him into its moldable body, Izuku was left screaming, thrashing around his arms in hopes to escape, but with each second it became harder to move. Talk about a lucky break, sniveling gutter trash, my favorite. The creature taunted, the distorted mouth that had created a chilling wide smile. Hell, Izuku tried to scream out, but the slime villain responded by covering most of his face, effectively silencing and suffocating him. He couldn't speak, he couldn't even hear, he couldn't breathe, and he could only see through his right eye. The lack of oxygen made his head spin as he slowly lost consciousness. His arms and legs were bound to his sides, and his sight began to blur. Is this ... the end? Izuku thought. He started to lose all feeling in his body, but I didn't do anything. His vision just happens to fall onto a mirror, as if the world was doing one last cruel act by letting him see himself slowly being taken by it. I've ... only burdened people my whole life. I burdened my mom to the point where she can't remarry or have another child even if she tried. She no longer has much of a choice of what she wants to do now. I burdened the Bakugos by having them constantly care for me and my mom after the injuries I gave her. I can only imagine what they had to give up behind their smiling faces. I burdened Kaken, even after everything he said to me. He always did look over me and still never let anyone else touch me. I never got why he was like that if he was just going to do it himself. I've only lived a life of inconveniencing others. What kind of hero does that? I guess that's why I was born the way I was. It was fate saying to give up. I was never going to be something. Steer your own life. To me, as long as you have a sliver of it left, you can do something with it and make it count. Those words echoed in the boy's head right at the verge of him fainting. Controlling my life. Making something I do count. Can I really do something like that? Probably not. I'm too dependent on others. The thoughts of every time someone had to make an exception or go out of their way for him came up. As the last seconds of life was escaping from him, his tunnel vision got one last look of his eye through the mirror, his currently very sharp pupil. But he began feeling weird. Was this death? His mouth felt like it was buzzing, his heart was pumping vigorously, and his right arm was shaking. It felt like his body was twisting itself apart. It's the possibility that I can is why. Almost as if his soul itself had grabbed his right arm, bringing it to life and with a frenzied strength managed to pierce through the villain's constraints around his hand. With the rest of his arm following, he reached over to the part of his face that was covered by the slime villain and with one swift moment ripped off just enough to free parts of his nostrils and mouth. A searing pain spread across his face, but he could breathe again, and with the little oxygen he had, he howled at the top of his lungs. I want to live. He only had that short moment of freedom before the slime villain completely envelopes his weak body again, this time leaving no room for him to escape again. As a final taunt to make up for Izuku's short victory, the villain mocked him with a single word. Futile. No, it wasn't. He's safe now, so have no fear. The slime villain quickly turned around, his eyes widening in fear after recognizing the voice. Texas Smash. From beneath the deafening blob of ooze that the villain captured him in, he could only make out booming echoes of a mighty voice and the rush of raging wind before suddenly the cold claustrophobic feeling that encased his body disappeared in a second. For the third time today, he felt himself being blown off his feet, but a lot gentler this time, like a graceful wind angel was kindly setting him down. With his vision getting a bit better, he got a glimpse at his mysterious savior with the mighty voice. The blurriness of his vision prevented Izuku from getting a good look, making all he saw a big hulking man with a wide smile and blonde hair. Why? Because I quote him here. While his body regained the essential oxygen it needed, he slipped into an unconscious state that he welcomed. It was strange, he knew he was passing out yet. His body felt more awake than ever, like he had awoken from a long nap. A few seconds ago this feeling was feared as it meant his possible death. Now he no longer had that fear because one thing was certain. He was alive. Hey nerd, how long are you going to be in there? Asked a young Katsuki, hastily knocking on the door of the bathroom as he rubbed his sluggish eyes. You've been in there ever since I woke up. What are you doing in there? At first, no reply was given from beyond the locked door. Nothing, Izuku finally answered. What? Then get out if you're already done in there. Katsuki told him, puzzled as to why he was hogging the entire bathroom to himself. I still want need a solemn sigh came from beyond the door. I just need to stay here just a little longer. Whatever, can I at least come in and brush my teeth? Oi, my toothbrush is in there. I already had to use my DMN mom's shower. I'm not using her toothbrush as well. Arg, now look at what you made me do. My mom will chew my ear off if she heard me swear. When Katsuki heard the door's lock make a sing sound, he took it as an invitation, opening the door and entering the bathroom. As he walked in, he spotted the green-haired boy. He was sitting in the bathtub with his knees hugging his chest and his head hanging low. The blonde was quite surprised to see Izuku the way he was. The fox boy was never one who walked around with his head held high by a mountain of confidence. Despite the hardships he faced, Izuku managed to keep his head on a leveled ground before now. Seeing him so gloomy like this out of nowhere felt unusual. It's the early morning and they haven't gone to school yet. What could have happened to make him so upset? Questions that he would like to ask flooded Katsuki's mind, yet there was a feeling dwelling in his stomach that told him not to. Besides, as his mother instructed, his job was to protect him from harm by the outside world. He doesn't need to get involved with all his affairs. Walking by the bathtub, the blonde approached the mirror, collecting his toothbrush and paste from the cabinet to start his morning routine. As he brushed his teeth, he took repeated looks through the mirror at Izuku, watching him. The greenette didn't move an inch the entire time. The grief he was suffering made him sit still like a statue. While it was unnecessary, Katsuki decided he was going to ask a few questions, convincing himself that it was only out of curiosity. Alright, I'll bite. Why the hell are you sitting in the bathtub? It's nothing. It's definitely something. You're defective but not senseless. How would you know? My mom said that people only sit in the bathtubs when they're not bathing to sulk. Like my dad when my mom played something called a breakup prank on him. Well, she initially said 2 reasons, but then never mentioned the second one. Anyways, there's obviously something on your mind. Spill it. I don't want to talk about it. Why? It's just personal. Fine, whatever. The blonde responded, spitting into the sink. Unscrewing the cap for the mouthwash, he prepared to rinse out the remaining bacteria from his mouth, not before telling Izuku, I just don't want this to be a daily thing. Going into my parents' bathroom made me find out way too much about my parents. With Katsuki being on his way out and the dawn of solitude steadily approaching, Izuku finally called out to him, Hey, Kaken. What? Katsuki replied, pouring in some mouthwash. Did you feel like you should have been born? A. This was a potent question for two 10-year-olds to ask each other, a strong contrast to what society would think kids of such a young age would be thinking about. The underbelly of humanity will always be dark and ugly, yet, it's an unavoidable trail many must face one day. Izuku had just encountered his own the night before. I mean, you ever just, realize how much your parents have to do for you. When things started sing about how horribly uncaring the world can be and how you've only been ignorant about it for so long because your parents used their well-being to shield it from you. Like how many things need to be done to stay alive, the amount of time they have to spend to raise us well, or how much your existence negatively impacted their life. Almost as if things would have been better had you not been born. Silence quickly filled the room after that statement. Both kids were in their own distressed state from the questions it brought, and it tormented them with their inability to come up with a solution. What can one say about a situation they know exists and recognize how devastating it can be, yet they don't know enough about the world to find an answer? For kids this age, they only had a few options of what they could do. Not being one to let such an existential dilemma slow him down, Katsuki spat out the solution before stating how he saw the issue. Hell if I know. Yeah, I thought so. Cause I'm not dumb enough to try to find out. What? There's no point in figuring out all that junk. It won't do me any good even if I get an answer anyways. Yeah, but what if? What if what? We're kids. We're not going to do anything important with that information and we can't fix anything with it. Not a lot can be done about it. May as well not waste the time thinking about it. Kaken. Izuku silently muttered under his breath, while understanding the intent behind those words. They were not enough to lift his sorrowful head. Regardless, he still gave an obligatory response to assure his friend, I guess you're right. Taking one last look at Izuku, Katsumi gritted his teeth in annoyance before heading out. We got a test today at school, so don't be late. Okay. The unanswered problems from youth are usually the scars that last the longest. Hey, called out a very mighty voice. Opening his eyes, Izuku would find himself with the perfect view of the city. Over 200 feet in the air. Freaking out from his frightening circumstance, Izuku started screaming at the top of his lungs, Ahhhh. I quote him falling. Calm down, young one. The voice called out to him again, You're not falling, you're holding onto my leg. Looking up, Izuku saw that his arms were tightly wrapped around an extremely muscular leg. His nails were intensely inserted into the fabric of the person's jeans. His eyes trailed up the limb to see who it was he was clinging to, surprised when he saw it was none other than the number one hero, All Might. His signature blonde hair, those white teeth, his manly jawline, and that iconic smile, they were all right there. Oh, All Might! Shrieked Izuku. His grip began to loosen as the shock of this revelation took over his body. Don't let go. All Might shouted back at him. If the boy slipped off at this height, he might not be able to save him in the condition he's in. He did, however, wish Izuku trimmed his nails, though they weren't breaking the skin. They were digging pretty deep into his leg. Hanging on for his life, Izuku tried to remember what had led to his current situation. The last thing he can remember was being suffocated by the slime villain while he was moping about earlier events. He was saved by someone, most likely All Might. So how did it escalate to this? If anything, the first thing that should have happened was him waking up and asking All Might for an autograph. Oh wait, that did happen. That was when it hit him. He did wake up from his near-death experience with the slime villain. His face was burning from accidentally scratching his fight from the fight, but he put that pain aside. Having recognized the extremely popular pro-hero, he asked for an autograph only to find out that he already got it on his school's jacket. His torn, battered, soaked, and burnt from being twice over exploded school jacket. He wished he had something better to get signed, like a notebook or any of his other items. Sadly, almost all of them, except for his necklace, was in the backpack he left behind at the scene of the explosion. It wasn't my fault, I was underprepared. I didn't expect to be saved by the number one hero, much less meet him. Shaking his head from these thoughts, Izuku knew he had to get back on track. The main question he should be trying to answer. How did he get here? The question, a single question he wanted to answer. It was that mindset of retelling himself about the question he needed to solve that he got the answer. He ended up here because he wanted to ask All Might a question, an extremely important and personal question for him. Unfortunately, the pro-hero seemed eager to leave as soon as he confirmed the young boy wasn't harmed. Maybe a bit too eager, as he didn't take the time to make sure an ambitious and slightly reckless fox boy didn't grab onto his leg before launching into the air. He must have fainted from skyrocketing into the air. His chagrin made him want to curl up into it for being so faint of heart in front of his idol. Why did he choose now to show off his mother's side of his genetics? When they finally landed, All Might again tried to run off after ensuring the young boy would have safe passage back down, but Izuku stopped him with the question. Is it possible for someone like me to become a hero, the way I am? Not stopping in his exit, All Might quickly turned his torso around with his signature smile, and told him, of course you can. I've known many cat-based quirk users who worked strong into becoming wonderful heroes. If you train strong enough you might even be able to join the wild cats. But my quirk isn't cat-based, Izuku corrected. A weird feeling of glee hit him by doing so, but also a bit of humiliation that his idol thought he had a cat quirk. After taking a deep breath he explained to him, I don't have any kind of quirk, I'm quirkless. This stopped the pro in his tracks. In a moment of confusion and instinctive curiosity, he gave the young boy that defied everything he knew of the world his full attention, both mentally and physically by turning his whole body toward him. He needed to be somewhere, anywhere that wasn't here, yet he stayed as it seemed like pure luck that he might have stumbled upon one of the many mysteries this world held. For once in Izuku's life, he willingly revealed himself, his true self, to another human being. He reached into his hair, undoing the string on his ears and letting them pop out of his hair. They still weren't that big, they barely even stuck out from his curly hair. As he showed them off, Izuku said, I know my fox fangs, nails, ears, and tail can throw you off. He has a tail. All Might thought to himself, not saying it out loud as to not discourage the boy. He already called him the wrong animal, anything more and he'll risk demoralizing the young boy, which is a cardinal sin for a hero to do in his mind. I was born inheriting an abnormal recessive gene from my father that gave me these fox limbs. As the green-haired boy explained this, he unbuckled the belt he used to hold his tail, letting the lifeless limb flop out. It's apparently a mutation that's not related to quirks. I don't get it either and we're unable to find my dad's files to see if his family's medical history might have an explanation. All Might seemed to stare intensely as he listened, letting the boy know he was listening to every word. Though honestly, I don't even think I want to know anymore, not like it'll change much. I can't hear out of my ears ... my fox ears, and any sounds I do pick up with them are painful. I can't wiggle my ears, wag my tail, naturally retract my claws, or have a good sense of smell. Nothing was enhanced by having these cursive parts. Because of my defective parts, I've only hurt and burdened everyone that cared enough to take care of me. I want to pay them all back for everything they sacrificed for me by trying to fulfill my dream of being a hero. Which is why I want to know, could I ever hope to be someone like you? The high-altitude wind blowing kept the rooftop from becoming too quiet as the two looked toward one another. This meeting with All Might, a miracle a boy like him could only dream of, was one that can turn his entire life around. Izuku thought someone with his experience and knowledge should know exactly what to say in his situation, something that can invigorate him on the right path. He just needs to hear those words, a statement that no one has ever said to them before, not after finding out about his condition. Right as the tall muscular man was about to speak, he suddenly spewed BLD out of his mouth, and became a small skeletal man. Freaking out, Izuku screamed in terror. WAAAH. Was it because you saw my tail? Oh no, I did it again. What? No. How would a tail even? What kind of life did you live to think that? All Might asked, coughing up a storm from his little BLD spewed. Elsewhere in the city, a white hooded person was watching over a scene where an explosion happened at a distance from the rooftop. She smiled when she saw the criminal being carried off by the police and heroes, jumping into a nearby alleyway. A few hundred yards away from her, a certain blonde had quickly broken off from his circle of friends, going off on his own. Not that he was very chatty with them, the earlier events of that day have put him in the worst mood than he's usually in, and now more current ones just turned things from aggravating to concerning. Why does that Deku have to cause so many problems? He thought to himself as he hurriedly spent a considerate amount of time looking through the streets. He had just gotten off a phone call with his mom and found out that Izuku has yet to return home, reminding him of a time the boy frightened his entire family with similar antics. He remembered it perfectly as that day Izuku randomly locked himself in the bathroom. A few PRD before school ended he got over a dozen texts from both their parents asking if Izuku was with him at school. They didn't even leave at the same time, nor was he sure if the guy was even going to go to school that day, yet all of a sudden, he was looked as his caretaker for someone he didn't even know went out the house. He could not forget what he felt that day. It was a feeling he preferred making others think he didn't have. This was why he was searching so seriously to find Izuku. He didn't even notice the bottle on the ground that had just a few minutes prior been dropped right out of the sky. As the bottle cap slowly twisted itself open, Katsuki was in his thoughts. Please don't tell me he actually. A few minutes earlier, walking down the streets of the city, a much more solemn Izuku held his head low. His ears and tails were hidden again, recounting the events that happened on that rooftop after the little misunderstanding. It took a while for the blonde man to convince him both that he was truly All Might and the fact that it wasn't showing him his tail that caused his sudden transformation. The image of that scar on his body haunted Izuku's mind. Someone with a golden body and the strengths of Hercules could end up like that. It was unbelievable. He lost the composure of his hair, his muscles, those chiseled pecs, his diamond near-perfect jawline, and his trillion-yen smile. All gone, leaving only a husk of the idol he thought he knew. What he said to him was what followed him the most. Pro heroes are always having to risk their lives in order to protect society. Some villains just can't be bitten without powers, and being ill-equipped to face a threat will not only hinder other heroes, but put the civilians in danger as well. So no, I honestly don't think you can be a hero without a quirk. I see. If you want to help people, there's plenty of other ways to do it. You can become a police officer. They aren't noticed and get a lot of CRP because the heroes take the spotlight for the process of capturing most of the villains, but it's a fine profession that's just as necessary. If your fox limbs ever start working, you'll become a key aspect to the entire force. Though the usage of quirks in public are held only to heroes, cases like yours, where your fox traits can be considered as a mutation quirk, can get some leeway since you can't help if your nose picks up scents better, or if your ears can pick up sounds easier, or even if your nails become pretty useful in a situation where you're low on equipment. It wasn't until later that Izuku became impressed how quickly All Might caught on to the shame he felt about his extra parts. Okay, looking back, he felt like he was too negative with his reaction. Considering what he's been told in his life, this was the only time someone actually gave him some positive alternative to his situation. Though like everyone else, no one believed he could be a hero. Look, young man, I get what you're feeling right now. Trust me, you don't need to do anything special for your family to make up for them raising you with all your faults growing. You being able to grow up and live a happy normal life is all your loved ones want from you. You don't need to get yourself maimed trying to reach for something clearly out of your capabilities, as an apology to them. It's not bad to have a dream, just make sure to dream for yourself, that your dreams are attainable and realistic, understand? Yeah, come on, I'm going to stop by the police station too. Drop off the villain, you can come to watch and maybe after I can take you out for ice cream before getting you home. No, I'm fine. You sure? I know a place I'm sure. Before All Might could get another word out, Izuku had rushed past him. Izuku facepalmed himself into blindness for how he acted, thinking to himself, why am I such a baby about things? I just missed out on seeing All Might turn in a villain firsthand and getting ice cream with him after. What is wrong with me? Most kids would literally kill someone for something like that, and I just threw it away because I was upset that he didn't think a man whose only traits are defective fox ears could become a hero that fights dangerous villains. What kind of? Before he finished that thought, his forehead smacked against something soft, but resistant like a bouncy, springing him back with enough force to knock him off his feet. This being too self-absorbed into his own mental self-defecation was becoming really unhealthy for him. One day he's going to be hit by a car or get caught in the middle of an explosion again. Recovering from his humiliating fall, he noticed a pair of shoes in front of him, meaning he bumped into someone. As usual, whenever anyone bumps into another on the streets, some apologetic banter begins. I am so sorry, my boy, watch what you bump into unless you want me to kick your butt there. Though this time was different. While the two had polar opposite initial reactions, they shared the same look of shock when they saw each other, instantly recognizing each other. Bunny ears, Izuku silently muttered under his breath. Broccoli head, a familiar dark-skinned bunny girl exclaimed. Astounded by what stars must have aligned for the two to meet again so soon, Izuku's eyes widened as he looked like he just saw his favorite video game character come to life. His lips quivered, legs felt like spaghetti, heart was PND, arms were shaky, body felt giddy with excitement, and he was speechless. He couldn't imagine what she was thinking because his mind was pulling blanks on him. On the other side, the bunny girl was just blinking at him nonchalantly thinking, didn't expect to see him here. You didn't have to do this, miss, Izuku told her. They were currently sitting at the sidewalk of a cafe, waiting to be served 3 scoops of refreshing frozen treats to enjoy on this bizarre day. Waving off his gratitude, the dark-skinned woman replied, I already told you to call me Miruko. And don't worry about it, call it your reward for keeping our little promise. Hopefully, it'll be enough for you. Because I don't have enough money for something else at the moment. And no, it's fine. I just wish you didn't trick me into accepting it by saying you were gonna force-feed me garlic flavor. I don't play tricks, I'm just very persuasive. It's borderline threatening. Oh, trust me, that's not a threat. When I give a threat, ex-cons cry. I can terrifyingly see that. The chilling vibe he felt was ironically complemented with the waitress serving them their frosty desserts. From his pressured choice, Izuku had ordered by pointing at the flavors he remembers he liked individually, and prayed he'll like it. Together, he got 2 scoops of a green color ice cream and a scoop of a yellow color one on top. Miruko had gotten something she referred to the waitress as her usual. 2 scoops of a white color ice cream and 1 scoop of a pinkish color one with red flakes over it. Picking up a spoon, Miruko waited for no one to start enjoying her servings as the greenette was hesitant in eating his. What? Miruko asked after seeing him be reluctant with his own. You made a bad combination. And no, I was wondering about the flavors you picked out, Izuku replied, picking up his spoon to stop the questioning. It's not any stranger than what you got. What even is that lime-colored one you got? It's lime, I got lemon and lime. What's wrong with lemon and lime? You might as well be injecting citrus into your bloodstream. At least then you'll save yourself the risk of brain freeze and a few bucks. I don't think that's how this works anyways, I was mostly referring to the red one on top. This is plain vanilla. The one on top is a raspberry flavor with red cinnamon sprinkles. Got an issue with cinnamon. Did you fail the cinnamon challenge before? No. And no, I've never tried the challenge before. It just seems weird for someone like you to eat that. Let me guess, you expected me to get carrot flavor. And maybe. Miruko raised an eyebrow at him, staring at Izuku with her unfazed interrogating eyes. Yes, thought so. A small blush came across Izuku's face. You wouldn't think the same. I thought most people with an animal-based mutation quirk would consider it if they liked the same food as the animal they're based on. Especially if it's in ice cream form. You're not wrong. I wish there was a carrot flavor. That'll be something to try. But, there is a carrot flavor. You're joking. And no, it's been a thing for a while now. D a minute, Dad. I swear we had a 2-hour argument about this last week. I think he just wanted to win his stupid game night. This caused Izuku to let out a chuckle. He wasn't sure why, but hearing that sort of slow-day hijinks between a father and his daughter seemed wholesomely entertaining to him. He didn't have many memories of his father, but the few he did remember usually involved some silly shenanigans that looked like they belonged in a sitcom. You're laughing now. Miruko commented with a smile of her own. That's good. You looked like you had a long day and need something to cheer you up. Bet you're now happy I dragged you here. Izuku nodded his head. Yeah, thank you, he said, taking a spoonful of his frozen treat in his mouth and relishing in its fruitful flavors. With the pair eating and chatting with each other, it served to soothe the wounded spirit of the fox boy, opening up his heart just enough to ask a few particular questions. So, do you want to be a hero? Drastically slowing down on her eating, Miruko sternly said, I guess, why? Readying her free hand just in case the boy says a little too much. Was just thinking about it earlier when, well, you were so skilled then. It looked like you were practicing to be a hero. Relaxing her hand as the boy showed to be discreet about her actions, Miruko replied more so, that guy was a major scumbag and I like beating up scum. Lost a favorite store of mine because of him. When your quirk first manifested, were you confident in your ability to be a hero? Did you ever doubt that you can become a hero? PFFT, of course not. Miruko confidently exclaimed. That's probably because her quirk was strong from the beginning. Izuku thought to himself before saying, would you still think that, if your quirk weren't as strong as it was now? The bunny girl scoffed, I mean yeah, whatever quirk I got, even if it was a weak one wasn't going to stop me from training my body to be that of a hero. That'll be stupid. That line hit Izuku weird, his heart irregularly beat afterward as if he was suddenly smacked with an unexpected object. He asked her, but if you have a weak quirk, won't that only put yourself and others in danger if you go against a strong villain? Sure, I guess that's a possibility, Miruko shrugged. Her eyes wandered a bit as she thought it over before stating, that's kind of the point of training your body. Have you seen the quirks most heroes have? A good amount of them are really niche abilities that only work in certain situations. To me, what makes a difference between a regular guy and a hero is how someone can use their capabilities to be as effective as possible in turning a situation to their favor with their niche. Izuku scooted his body forward, seating at the edge of his seat as he asked more questions. He was getting more intrigued by the second. The kind of attitude she had was a polar opposite of what he usually gets whenever he asks these kinds of questions, and it perplexed him on how he should feel. Was she just being overconfident and naive, or just more optimistic and determined? He needed to ask her an important question. I have a quirk that's not that strong, to the point where I'm basically quirkless outside of my nails. Do you think I have a chance at being a hero? How the FCK should I know? Izuku blinked, his eyes were wide and his jaw dropped low from the unexpected reaction the dark-skinned girl gave. He remembered getting that kind of response to a question once before. The memory seemed too distant to properly remember. Only the feeling of not knowing how to feel about that kind of answer remained. How half-completed it felt to hear. As Izuku tried to speak, he stammered with his words. I don't know who you are, what you can do, or what you can grow to be. No one does, it's only you who can truly bring out what you can do with your own effort. My quirk wasn't that strong either when it first manifested. I'm AFC King Rabbit. When was the last time humanity was threatened by a rabbit? Regardless of that, I was prepared to kick butt without using a quirk at all. It was only a coincidence that it became something useful later on. My old man said it was because of some super smart science CRP, but I say it's because of how badass I was training. So just do that, Miruko casually said. Me, I don't think I can get like that. Why not? You may not look like much, but I don't see anything that'll prevent you from trying to be more. I just think my quirk is too detrimental to grow into something. Almost as if things would be better if I never had this quirk to begin with ... or if I was never born. He wished he was brave enough to say that last part. Miruko abruptly slammed the table with her hand as she rolled her eyes, groaning in annoyance. Ugh. I hate those kinds of philosophical questions. They're utterly horrendous to hear, take a considerate amount of time to think through, and mean nothing in the end. They mean nothing, Izuku repeated, feeling a bit skeptical about what she meant. He was pretty sure questioning if his life had a positive meaning meant something, if not to anyone then himself. Yeah, they mean nothing in the end, which is why I never wasted my time with them. Think about most of those kinds of questions, they're extremely vast and too vague. What is the point of life? What is the role of humans? Is the sky blue? Should we blah 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 blah? She said mockingly, exaggerating her expressions in a way that'll make the ancient Greek philosophers rage. I'm so sick of hearing them. What are you going to do if you get an answer? Not a lot, because that's all you got, an answer. Nothing more, nothing less, just something that can't change what already is, which was the point of people searching for an answer to begin with. You're not going to change the world or make anyone's life better by trying to answer some rhetorical questions. It's like asking if my day would have been perfect if that villain attack didn't happen. Sure, it may have been better if my favorite store wasn't destroyed. Of course, something has a chance of being better if something negative didn't happen. Water is wet. That doesn't solve anything, and me moping about it isn't going to fix it either. I just take what happens to me with what I got and try to get where I want. If I can do something, then I do the best I can. If I can't, then I see if I improve myself into being able to do that thing before moving on. Before she continued any further, she paused with an enlightening look on her face, as if she had a revelation of her own from the speech she said. Facepalming herself, she grumbled, "Blah, I sound like my FC King dad." She pointed a finger at the young fox boy before stating, "Point is, stop holding yourself back by thinking about stupid SHD and do something. Life always throws challenges at you. Start learning how to improve so you can kick their butt. You want something done, instead of crying to your lucky star hoping for a miracle, you just do it and become that miracle." A drop of sweat dripped down Izuku's face. Her simple way of doing things was problematic since it clashes against the usual meticulous lifestyle he used to live. She makes life sound so much easier than what it really is, which could be beneficial if used in the right situation, but for someone like him, this wasn't something he can take in one sitting. Was he really being stupid thinking about half the stuff he does? The best way to find out was to look into the other side and see what results he can yield. Where would I start doing something like that? The fox boy asked, his curiosity growing exponentially from wanting to explore this new way of life. Typically anywhere, from your own room to like a junkyard. That's where I started out. But if you really SCK at training yourself, she reached into her back pocket to get out a business card, writing on the back of it an address and 2 numbers before handing it over to him. Try this place. If you're having trouble finding the place, the bottom number is mine. As Izuku accepted the card, his hand began shaking. An overwhelming amount of joy filled his body, causing him to get a wide smile, and his eyes began glittering. If he could move his tail right now, he'll probably be wagging it like a dog despite being a fox. Miruko didn't know it yet, but she had just helped him achieve a great thing in his life. I finally got a girl's number. He cheered in his head. It was now Miruko's turn to have a sweat drop from her head. She doesn't know what his life might be like, but she wasn't going to lie about how his reaction seemed a bit too creepy. His excitement soon died out when he turned to the front of the card and saw it was the business card to a pet shop. Looking up at her with an ambitious questioning look to know the reason she had this. Sensing the speculation of a stereotype flooding his mind, Miruko quickly stated, "Don't ask, it's a long story." Knowing how complicated situations can be when one is living under special circumstances, Izuku chose to leave it there. "Oh, okay." Boom. They recognized that sound. An explosion must have happened not too far from them. With both of them having their curiosity in the cause, they both went together to see what was happening. On the way there, Izuku thought about how fortunate he was that all these things were happening in such proximity to him. For better or worse, his luck stat has been the all-star of his day. When they finally reached the site, Izuku was met with a horrifying sight. Blazing bright red flames had consumed most of the shopping district, slowly burning down the cherished buildings around them and their cherished decorations. The flames lit up the area to look like a scorching orange inferno had appeared out of nowhere, pure contrast to the calm shiny blue scene that the rest of the city had. A piece of hell had replaced the streets that Izuku once knew for years. It was no longer the peaceful place that people came to cheerfully enjoy their lives, but a disastrous space that no man can walk through. All the heroes that were currently there had their hands filled protecting the other civilians or were trying to control the ever-growing fire. Their only saving graces were the 3 high-ranking heroes that were on the scene, but even then there was trouble. Mount Lady couldn't assist as her giant form was too big to fit in the narrow streets without completely destroying every building in her path. Death Arm's abilities in this situation weren't any good outside of making sure the civilians didn't get hurt, and Kamui Wood couldn't fight as well because the flames kept destroying the wood he'll create, which only ended up adding fuel to the fire. They were utterly overwhelmed and helpless to detain the villain that caused all that. That was the worst part of this entire situation. The slime villain, he was back. Just seeing him struck fear in Izuku. He still remembers the crushing feeling of how the villain tried to slowly suffocate him less than an hour ago. It was the first time ever that he didn't want to watch a villain attack and go straight home. The only thing that kept him there was the lack of strength his legs had, too petrified from his fear to move. That fear grew into a complete nightmare when he saw who was unfortunately caught in the dastardly villain's hands. "Kaken," Izuku softly said. It was supposed to be a yell, but his fright stole all the power in his lungs. He was watching someone slowly getting asphyxiated, yet the one feeling helpless was him, the one safely behind the line that's being protected by multiple heroes. Seeing the situation and noticing Izuku's reaction, Miruko already knew she was going to do something about it. She patted Izuku on the shoulder, assuring him, "I'll save your friend, just sit tight." She ran away from the crowd, trying to find an alleyway she could change in to hide her identity. Despite Miruko trying to ease Izuku's nerves that someone was going to come save Katsuki, a single thought filled his mind. How is he here? All Might captured him, he showed me. Why isn't All Might stopping him again? And why of all people was Kakin the one the slime villain captured? This isn't even a street Katsuki usually goes to in his free time. This is. Izuku's eyes widened as in a single moment, he dreadfully solved all of his own questions. He didn't need to hear mutters of the surrounding civilians to know what truly happened. What happened? I was here from the beginning. That villain came out of a bottle like some kind of genie. That poor boy was the closest one to it. This is where Bakugo went. What made him run out on us? I overheard part of a phone call he got from his mom. Apparently, he was looking for someone here. You're telling me he got into this mess just because he was looking for someone? That's rough, buddy. This is all my fault. A single thought that cleared out everything else. His heart sank when he realized this and held his hand over his mouth mortified. It's because of me that the villain escaped. I remember now, when I grabbed onto All Might's leg my nails during his attempt to leave ... They ripped up his breath as I gripped for my life letting the bottle slip out. He must have not noticed because he was too busy making sure I was safe. Kachin was here looking for me. Probably being forced to from his mom since I haven't returned home yet and didn't call. Now he could die. And All Might, he can't help us and no one knows it yet. He wasted all his time and energy helping me. Now there's no hero whose quirk can stop this villain. I don't even think Miruko's would help if she jumped in. This is all my fault. Kakin is getting hurt because of me again. It has always been like this to Izuku. No matter what he does, or where he goes, he always ends up causing irreparable damage to everyone around him. First his mother with her internal scars, then the Bakugos who work extra strong to take care of his family. Even his idol All Might can't fulfill his heroic duty in a time of desperate need. And now Katsuki might even die because he was trying to make sure he got home safely. This wasn't the first time Katsuki has been horribly hurt because of him. "Stop it, let me go, it hurts," was the cry of a younger Izuku. A group of 3 older kids had cornered him on his way back from school. One of them had gotten extremely jealous when a girl he liked started fawning over Izuku after she caught a rare sight of him with his young fox ears and tail out. It was a simple mistake that happened only because Izuku had carelessly rushed himself to get to pee and didn't properly tie down his fox parts, leading to them slipping out unexpectedly on his way back to the locker room after the class. He thought everything would be fine since only one girl saw. He did feel a bit uncomfortable with her interest in him, especially when she asked to show him her tail, but he managed to get through it since it wasn't the first time an older female showed intense interest in his fox parts. How wrong he was. FC King Brat, you really thought you were special because of these little things. One of the boys said as he pulled on his ears harder. Izuku couldn't fight back as the other boys were holding his arms keeping him still. And no, please stop, you're going to tear them off. Stop being a baby, I just want to see them properly. I want to see what all the fuss was about and your hair is in the way. You're lucky I don't just give you a much needed haircut. Those boys were pulling on his ears so strong that the delicate skin on his still developing ears began to tear. Tears began to stream down his face as a bit of BLD started leaking down the top of his head. Despite his outward distaste for all his fox parts, he strangely didn't want to lose any of them. They were the only things he had to remind himself that he was his father's son. It was a paradox of self-hating with the want to preserve them, but it was one of the few reasons why he never did something as drastic as cutting off his fox ears and tail. Now a couple of random teens were going to do it for him. Stop, why don't you make me? He's not able to do that, but I can. A third voice rang out. It took a second for the kid bullying Izuku to realize that line wasn't said by one of his friends. As soon as he turned behind him to see who it was, his face was met with an explosion. Shocked, the bully let Izuku go and tended to his burning face, screaming in pain. Oi, who the hell are you, kid? One of the bully's friends shouted at the person who assaulted him. That person was also met with an explosive blast, this time to the stomach, throwing him onto his back as he released the defenseless fox boy. The other boy didn't even get a chance to say anything before he was blasted off of Izuku as well. Standing there was Katsuki, his hands were crackling with tiny sparks as he stared down the older kids. "I'm the one responsible for that crybaby, and you all FC kid up by going this far," he told them. Looking back, Katsuki might have tried a bit too strong to look cool, but at that moment he may as well have looked like a superhero. Recovering from the initial sneak attack, the bully who started this managed to move past the burning sensation on his face and glared at the boy. "You little punk, I'll kick your butt. I'd like to see you try," Katsuki taunted, readying himself for a fight. "Don't get too CCKY, you're not the only one with a quirk," the bully replied, his hands slowly turned into the hooves of a donkey. His friend began to get back up as well, activating their quirks as well. This wouldn't be a fair 1-versus-1 fight one would expect, but what should you expect from teenagers who will do this over a girl? In spite of this, Katsuki's confidence never wavered as he declared, "Bring it." The fight lasted for a few minutes and ended with the bullies running away, their clothes shredded with embers and their bodies covered in cinders and bruises. As expected, Katsuki stood tall in the direction the bullies ran, taking in the glory of his win, and the older boys completely lost. The young fox boy's eyes glowed with admiration seeing him there, until he turned around and showed his battered face. His lips were inflated from the bruises to the point of being comically big, and one of his eyes was swollen shut. It later became a black eye. "You good, Deku?" he asked casually as if nothing was wrong. "You're asking if I'm good?" Izuku shouted back, surprised the concern was on him. More than once had Katsuki put his livelihood under great stress for Izuku's sake. Now he's the one in danger. He hated seeing Katsuki hurt because of him, yet all Izuku can do about it is wallowing in self-pity and angst, on the verge of tears. How cowardly, he thought to himself. "I'm sorry. I quote him sorry. Please, someone, anyone, help him. Save Kaken." Like every other time, he didn't know what to do. Izuku prayed, hoping for a change of fate. But nothing happened. Katsuki was still in the crushing grip of the slime villain. Izuku could see the life drain out of his face from the lack of air. He wasn't going to last much longer. As always, Katsuki did his best to struggle free to no avail. He was as helpless as Izuku was in this situation. And for the first time, there was pure fear in his eyes. It was that horrified look on his face that made something inside of Izuku awaken once again, and a single thought filled his mind again. Save Kacchan. Without a second thought, Izuku felt his body dash forward. Charging through the civilian line the heroes tried to maintain toward the villain. His actions shocked the heroes that were trying to keep the civilians back and the ones watching from behind. They tried to call out to him. "No, you idiot. Hey, kid, get back here. It's too dangerous for you. Stop before you get yourself killed." The screams caught the attention of Miruko, who turned back to see a familiar green-haired kid had dropped all forms of sense and had rushed straight toward the villain. Even though she was surprised that the boy would take such an action, she thought, "What the hell is he doing? What am I doing?" Izuku thought to himself. Despite his mental objection, he didn't stop charging at full speed. "Why did I run? Why can't I stop?" You want something done, instead of crying to your lucky star hoping for a miracle, you just do it and become that miracle. This voice, Izuku thought to himself, remembering the voice. Like before, his body seemed to be acting based on the words being told to him. Point is, stop holding yourself back by thinking about stupid SHD and do something. He wasn't even sure what he was doing, but he was doing something. The slime villain noticed this as well and didn't hesitate to extend out one of his slimy tendril hands. He's going to do something. What do I do? The greenet remembered a piece of advice that was in his notebook. That's right, I need to stun the enemy by ARGH. I don't have anything on me I can throw. In the split second of him being distracted by his thoughts, the villain had used his tendrils to pick up a broken shard of glass and swung it at the rushing boy. Izuku didn't know what to do, and he was scared of the obvious threat of death that had just approached him. He's going to kill me, Izuku thought as the jagged shard drew closer to him. Life always throws challenges at you. Pro heroes are always having to risk their lives in order to protect society. Twitch. That strange instinctive feeling Izuku felt before erupted again. The moment must have pushed his senses to the limit as his entire body was shaking, and he swore there was a twitching signal in his head that warned of the incoming attack. It was thanks to that feeling snapping his body out of its suicidal charge that he was able to backstep the villain attack. Possibly a bit too late, as the glass edge tore through Izuku's shirt and slashed at him diagonally. For a moment, everyone held their breath as they wondered if they just saw the boy get cut down. Everyone except for Izuku, who as soon as the blade passed by his body, he immediately continued his charge forward. He was unharmed, his shirt was ripped off, the remaining scraps of his already barely held together uniform had fallen off as he ran, but he didn't have a scratch on him. Thank God for the belt that tied his tail to his back. It had luckily blocked the cut from actually hitting him and gave him the fraction of a second he needed to dodge. With his belt and shirt gone, his tail was now flying in the wind as he ran. He was so close to Katsuki, but with the threat the villain posed, it kept him too far away. If he stopped and thought, one of the heroes would surely come in to save him, but then that'll leave Katsuki completely alone to die. He can't stop moving, only he can do something to help Katsuki. He just doesn't know what. He barely evaded the first attack that could have mortally wounded him if he didn't have that lucky dodge. Should he pray for that kind of luck a second time? He's been on a lucky streak already today. It was going to run dry soon, and it would not be favorable to Izuku if it did now. He needed to know what he could do. Start learning how to improve so you can kick their butt. Learn, improve, he repeated those words in his head. On the spot, without time to stop and prepare, he was going to improve his untrained self. He was going to create a miracle of his own. Was it crazy? Yes, but it's not like there was much of a choice. Katsuki only had a few more moments left before the worst could happen. He wasn't dumb enough to think that he can make himself into a perfect fighter in a second. Instead, he quickly analyzed the situation with 3 quick facts that he was going to use to survive this. 1. The slime villain's moves are predictable and sloppy, probably from overly relying on his malleable state making him immune to most attacks and thinking Izuku can't do much. 2. The slime villain can't do anything else besides SWNGNG his slimy arms, meaning his attacks are heavily limited. 3. If Izuku can get that twitchy feeling he felt before, He can use that as an indicator when he needs to dodge. Stupid brat, you won't get that lucky again, the villain shouted. Izuku had barely established those facts in his head before the slime villain threw another slash his way. There's no turning back now. Either he'll be able to dodge or he's going to go down as the suicidal fox boy who one day finally had enough and death charged at a villain. He tried to clear his mind to concentrate, trying to listen to his body. He needed to notice when it gave him a sign. Twitch. There it was. Remembering how he barely avoided the earlier attack when he dodged with a backstep, Izuku knew he needed a different way, this time choosing to duck below the strike. He felt the sharp glass glide through the curls of his green hair. Strands of his hair were blown away into the air by the gust of wind. He eluded the attack by a literal hair. But the trouble didn't end there. While he had ducked the initial attack, the still crouching Izuku would look up to see that a second attack was heading his way. He hadn't even recovered from dodging the first strike. Now a low-aiming one was coming at him and he didn't know what to do. His senses alerted of the attack, but he was in a bad position to dodge like he did before and there wasn't time to think of an alternative. He was stuck. Jump dumbass. A recognizable voice shouted through the sea of concerned voices behind Izuku. He couldn't turn around to see who it was, but he assumed it was the same person whose advice he's been following during this entire idiotic charge of his. Bending his knees, he converted his body from an awkward crouching position to one preparing itself for a leap. There was only one issue, he realized. My legs. They're too slow on their own to get me off the ground before he hits me. I won't make it if I keep this pace. I need to do something to speed myself up. Think. From his hunker-down position, he slammed his two hands onto the strong ground. As he tightens his hands, his nails grinded against the concrete of the streets, and he synced his arms with his legs. Like a canine, he used the strength in all four of his limbs to move himself off the ground. He might have used a bit too much power in his jump, as his leap that was supposed to be enough to go over one attack ended up becoming a full-on daring lunge toward the villain. The wind was blowing in Izuku's face, making it strong to see. His tail was aimlessly fluttering around, and his father's memento was whirling in the air from the gust, only staying in his possession thanks to its chain. He was freaking out as this wasn't part of his barely thought-out plan. It was unexpected, but his actions seemed to surprise the villain and got him even closer to Katsuki. With a heavy chest, Izuku shouted out his name. Kaken. The struggling Katsuki, whose body was going limp, heard his name being called. His dreary eyes drifted in the direction it came from. A bit of life was ignited in him as he spotted a wild fox boy flying toward him. His nails were fully extended, his teeth were keen, and his green eyes had pupils that were sharp. The tail he usually hid under his clothes was now freely hovering behind him, and the string that usually held down his ears had snapped off from the previous attack, letting them flow out of his hair. All of Izuku, human or fox, was on display for everyone to see. The boy who once was cautious of everyone seeing him this way now didn't care what anyone thought of him. He only had his one goal in mind. Save Kaken. What do I do now? Izuku thought to himself. That's right. As the distance between him and the villain was close, Izuku clawed at the slime villain's eyes, blinding him and releasing his hold on Katsuki. Stun him. Landing on his feet, the greenet wasted no time tearing away the gunk that was covering his friend's mouth so he could breathe. As soon he could open his mouth, Katsuki took a deep breath of much-needed air, and to revivify his body. Breathe, he immediately yelled. Deku, what the hell are you doing here? I don't know, I just started doing stupid things. Izuku told him as he continued scraping away other parts of his body. Get away from me, I don't need to be saved by you. You're just going to get in the way and get killed. I can't. Why? I don't even like you. Izuku couldn't help but smile. Not even he truly knew why he did what he did. Life without Katsuki there to constantly put him down sounded great. And this was a situation where no one expected him to do anything or would blame him if he was helpless. Yet, he was still here. Was it fate, his will, or pure stupidity? Either one would be fitting for this situation. The best he told Katsuki was something he felt he learned from him after all these years. Honestly, I don't know if I hate you or not myself, but I don't think that should matter when your responsibility is saving someone. I can't just sit back and let you die. After freeing Katsuki's shoulder, he grabbed on it and pulled with all his might to get his friend out of there, letting out a roar. We're going home together. The statement stunned Katsuki into silence. Echoes of a distant memory lingered on his mind. Thank you for saving me, Kaken. Whatever, Deku, it's not like I had much of a choice. Mom made you my responsibility, so I couldn't sit back and watch you get hurt even if I wanted to. Despite Izuku's best effort, he couldn't get Katsuki free by himself. The slime villain, while blinded, still got a grip on his lower body. His fox ears were in pain from the villain's painful yell. That didn't deter Izuku's resolution to continue to pry the blonde away, bit by bit. With enough of the slime around his arms having been torn away, Katsuki could move his hand, just enough for him to use his quirk to blast one of his hands free. UFC King idiot, Katsuki spat, as Izuku grabbed his other arm and he turned his free hand in the direction of his trapped one. He yelled, that was my plan from the start of this mess. Releasing another explosion that blasted away enough slime so they can pull out his other arm. With both hands free and Izuku pulling him out, Katsuki managed to turn his torso to face the villain. Lucky for him, the slime didn't completely dissipate his nitroglycerin, and with the stress of the situation causing him to uncontrollably sweat, the villain was chock full of ammunition for his quirk. Hold on. Katsuki ordered Izuku, who had no issues obeying in this situation. Then there was a spark. A spark that ignited the chemical substance that covered the villain, and a fiery red explosion erupted that rumbled the street. The shockwave of the explosion sent the two kids back onto the ground strong, and the force broke the chain holding his necklace. Izuku lost track where it flew off to. The kids looked at their handiwork. The smoke had engulfed the area, and burning embers floated in the sky. It might be a bit early to call it, but they got him. For a split second, the two boys shared a moment where they were both amazed at what happened. Then Katsuki turned around, his usual anger in his eyes as he looked like he was about to shout, "You." But then he suddenly stopped. "What?" Izuku asked, wondering what prevented him from yelling at him. Too stunned to say anything, Katsuki continued to stare at Izuku, amazed at what he was seeing. Unbeknown to the smiling Izuku, his cursed fox ears were twitching. Not only that, but his tail was wagging back and forth on the ground as well. The parts of him that they all once thought were dead weight was now moving with life. They weren't moving much, and from the crowd perspective nothing was happening, but Katsuki swears he saw them moving. He knew something had surely awakened in the boy to have caused this. Neither knew that this small victory was the fruitful results of Izuku's changed fate, and a new resolve for life. "Look out," a voice called out. Coming from the direction of the crowd, something zipped past them at high speed into the cloud of smoke, clearing out enough to expose a recovering slime villain planning to pull a sneak attack on the unexpecting boys. "Die, you DMN brats," declared the villain, reeling back his hand to give one last effort to enact his revenge on the kids that ruined his glorious return. "Save the kids." Death Arms shouted as they all charged in to try to save the boys. Miruko wanted to go in as well, but found her sprinting path blocked off by the crowd, having to take a quick detour that could result in deadly effects. Katsuki quickly kneeled in front of Izuku, readied his hand in an attempt to muster up enough sweat for another explosion, but his slime-covered hands dampened it. Izuku's senses were going crazy about the oncoming attack. Having run out of ideas and strength, Izuku sat down with tears of acceptance in his eyes, still smiling. He only had time for one final thought. "We're dead, should have run while we had the chance." Slam! As the villain lifted his grimy hand expecting to see two mangled boys' bodies, he was surprised to see that he only hit the street. Standing in front of him was a proud All Might in his signature buff form. Both the boys were safely tucked in one of his muscular arms. At this point, Izuku, after making peace with dying for that brief moment, was barely even conscious to see what was going on. All he knew was All Might has saved them, and that's all he needed to know. No doubt All Might was saying some kind of inspirational speech right now, but his hearing had checked out long again. Most of it was just a buzzing mess. To everyone else, they heard the final attack to put an end to this nightmare scene. Detroit Smash. "You two were so brave," one of the heroes said once the mess got settled, praising the young kids that showed true courage in the face of danger. That compliment was given to Bakugo and Miruko. Apparently, Miruko was the one that alerted everyone of the slime villain's plan to attack while everyone thought it was over and kicked that rock to expose it. She also saved a few civilians from getting hurt when she destroyed some rumble that fell after Bakugo's explosion while the heroes were too distracted watching the boys. Katsuki was getting praised for being able to blast himself free from the villain's hold on him and for remaining calm through most of it. Izuku, on the other hand, received a severe scolding from the heroes for being reckless and every synonym to that word. Not surprisingly, almost saving someone and not getting yourself killed doesn't count for much in the face of rules, and the only thing he got that wasn't him being berated was a sort of compliment where Kamui Wood said his lunge at the villain was impressive for a kid to do and that he was lucky his claws were sharp enough to pry apart the villain's slime grip. He was honestly happy this was the worst that he got considering what he did. It could have been worse, but he guessed both of them getting out of there alive and surprisingly unharmed is what saved him from something worse. Though it might have killed the little bit of life his fox parts had as they didn't move after being saved. He was chastised for almost half an hour, at least he hoped it was only half an hour. He wasn't going to lie that his sense of time was off for a multitude of reasons. He was only saved when Katsuki grabbed the back of his neck collar and began dragging him away despite the hero's protest. "Hey kid, we're not. We get it already, he's a dumbass. We can all agree on that. Now we need to get home soon or else our moms will both kill me and then die of a heart attack." The heroes didn't object anymore as the blonde's statement left them questioning the particular relationship between their mothers and didn't want to step on that topic. In public, Miruko watched as the pair walked off, smiling as she mumbled to herself, "Interesting kid." The walk back home was mostly silent between the two of them. Izuku had gotten a free Wildcats t-shirt from one of the shopkeepers so he didn't have to go home shirtless, his only reward for his efforts. It's a bit embarrassing to wear, but at least it's something of a souvenir CRP. He finally realized that his black foxtail, his father's memento, the only material thing he had to remember him by, had fallen off. Right as the fear struck his face, he found his prized possession dangling in front of him. Looking to the side, he saw that it was Katsuki that was holding it out to him. "Took you long enough to notice, some bunny girl found it and I had her give it to me." He mumbled quietly. He wasn't able to look Izuku in the eyes. I got it fixed, this time with a metal chain so it'll be durable and won't look like a gift from a grandma gives to a 5-year-old. If it breaks again, you're on your own. Taking the necklace and putting it on, Izuku let out a sigh of relief. Thank you. Whatever, I just didn't want to hear you crying about it once we got home. As the two walked, Katsuki's pace continued to rapidly slow down, lagging behind Izuku. And I'm sorry. Izuku immediately turned back to him. He swore he just heard him whisper something. What? I said you're such a sorry weakling, Deku. Geez, you'll always be a defective brat and I'll never ask you for help ever. Katsuki shouted at him, his eyes lit back up with rage as he gritted his fist. So careless, where would you be without me? Izuku stared blankly for a minute before giving a soft smile, and replying, I have no idea, I can't imagine a life without you. The explosive blonde's eyes widened. That wasn't an expected response. To hide his reaction to it, he turned his face away from the greenet, giving off a grunt, mumbling something about never looking down on him. While it may be flattering to hear, Izuku was being serious. Despite the highs and lows of their relationship, he couldn't say for certain how his life will be without his childhood friend. So many moments were heavily influenced by him. Like that day all those years ago when he was 10. He was crying under an underpass and was seriously considering running away from home. That was until a certain blonde walked by him. At first they just stared at each other as they were both surprised to find the other there. You were here of all places. Keikaku. The awkward silence tensed up the air. Scratching his cheek as he thought of what to say, a smile came upon Katsuki's face as he jabbed a thumb behind him and asked, so there's this new vigilante game that came out at the arcade but it's stupidly 2 players only. So you wanna be my partner? At first the fox boy stared back at him like he was crazy, then he said, okay. That became the day Izuku didn't run away from home because of video games. To Izuku's knowledge, it was by pure chance that Katsuki walked past him that day. He had yet to find out what he was doing there in the first place. It only made one thing clear to Izuku. Too many things were affected for him to tell for certain how his life would be if he wasn't in his life. He was going to take Miruko's advice and not waste his life thinking about it. Katsuki was alive, nothing was going to change that, and he felt like their relationship had changed in some way today. Then Katsuki suddenly blasted himself with his quirk. Screaming, Izuku asked, Kacchan. Why? Getting up on his feet, the blonde had the look of a crazed man as he says, I realize that I'm way too okay to go home. What? Izuku, look at you. You're not even wearing the same clothes you left the house in anymore. They're in tatters, and that's not even mentioning all your SCS and bruises. If we walk in, and you're like that, and I come in perfectly fine, my mom will annihilate me. Don't even get me started if he finds out about the villain attacks. So you're going to blow yourself up? Yes, if I look busted up as well, then she'll believe I tried my best. Can't we just tell the truth? FCK no. She won't believe it. Katsuki says, running off down the street. I'll be back, meet me by the house but don't go in, okay? Sometimes Izuku forgets that you can't reason with Katsuki on certain things. As told of him, the greenet walked home by himself. On the way he heard a voice he didn't expect to hear again today. I am here. It was strange chatting with the current #1 hero, especially in the form he was currently in. They spent a few moments catching up before All Might got to the reason he was here for. Young Midoriya, I wanted to talk to you about your question earlier. Something Izuku never expected to do in his life was interrupt his idol mid-sentence. Actually, All Might, thank you for your concern but that won't be necessary. What? I've decided to continue working toward my dream of being a hero. You are. Nodding, Izuku told him, if there was one thing I learned today, it's that this world can be cold and cruel, constantly throwing challenges your way. That's the reason you can't let others decide what you're capable of, so you can grow to overcome those challenges no matter what condition you're in. Which is why I no longer need anyone to tell me if I can be a hero. I'm not sure if I'll actually become one, but I'm going to work strong from now on towards it. I'll see if I can make myself into a true hero. So then, was that daring attempt to save your friend trying to be that hero? All Might asked, raising an eyebrow. Immediately Izuku's confident look crumbled to one where he was about to cry. No. I wasn't trying to be a hero then, are you crazy? In fact, I didn't even plan on doing anything, it just sorta happened. I almost died there, oh my god, what was I thinking? I just saw my friend in trouble and really wanted to save him. Next thing I knew, I was running in. Did I mention that I almost died more than once? All Might crack a smile. That's a relief then. I might have been worried if you had acted only out of some kind of self-validation. You see, there are stories about every hero, how they became great. Most have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think, almost on their own as if they had some kind of instinct about it. And today, that's what happened to you. Despite your flaws and what holds you back, you seem to have awakened that special instinct on your own. The green eyes of Izuku sparkled as he was listening to his idol. Is he? Young man, I'm glad you'll no longer wait for someone to tell you what you can be. Because you too can become a hero, and I'll be the first one to wholeheartedly say that I believe it. Never in Izuku's life did anyone ever say he can be something as grand as a hero and completely meant it. Every time there was always a bit of pity, doubt, or lack of sincerity because of his condition. He knows he just said that he didn't need to get that from anyone anymore, but it still felt unbelievable to actually hear it from someone's mouth. There was only one other time where he felt like someone truly meant the encouragement they gave him about being strong. You are both a kind soul and a powerful person, Izuku Midoriya. Never forget that and never be ashamed of your body, especially of those ears of yours. Filled with joy, Izuku couldn't help but break into tears, trying his best to wipe them away. He wanted to stay strong but was overcome with emotion that the tears kept coming despite his efforts. As the number one hero looked down at the tearful eye, he couldn't help but feel his heart warm up a bit when he started seeing the boy's ear twitch and his tail wag a bit. Life will always be strong, nothing can stop it. That doesn't mean that those with bad luck are destined to suffer forever. Dreams can become reality. Sometimes all it takes is a little luck and the world is full of different ways for that to come. We may not even know it when we pass by it. Just like how Izuku has yet to find out that his ill fate was changed thanks to an encounter with a certain hare, and it's those moments that'll forever change the world. Who knew so much can happen because of a pair of fox ears? Dreams. What is a dream? A succession of images, ideas, emotions, and sensations that usually occur involuntarily in the mind during certain stages of sleep. The content and purpose of dreams are not fully understood to this day, despite being a topic of scientific, philosophical, and religious interest throughout recorded history. Do they mean anything? The common theory goes that dreams don't mean anything. They're only electrical brain impulses that bring out random thoughts and imagery from our memories. Like everything else in the world, people expect things to be grounded in reality. While it would be amazing to occur, we can't live through life thinking everything we experience can be fantasized as we see in stories. But then again, this world is full of mysteries. We can't put a definitive on a meaning as we do not know how they work or their capabilities. And one of the biggest mysteries is a person's unconscious mind. They're filled with undiscovered potential and are an enigma to understand. Such as a certain dream Izuku has been having ever since he was a kid. The first time he had it was when he was 3 years old. The eyes of the young boy opened, only to see pure black. He couldn't move, couldn't hear, and couldn't speak. He was paralyzed in an encapsulated void of nothingness, one he could not escape from. He doesn't know how he got there, how long he was in there for, or why he was sealed there in the first place. He just appeared to be in there, trapped, unable to move or see his own 2 hands, forced to stay suspended there for an incomprehensible amount of time. He wanted to scream, he wanted to yell, he wanted to fight against this crushing claustrophobic feeling he was facing, and break out this anomalous borstal. It was a notion he felt a single time before then. Like most dreams, this lasted for a few minutes and once it was over, Izuku forgot about it. Most would classify a dream like that as a nightmare, and while people remember more nightmares than they do dreams, this occurrence wasn't that memorable to the fox boy. During the moment it can be terrifying to be trapped in a weird space where the only thing you're able to do is exist. Once the experience is over there's very little to nothing to take away from it. No giant monster, nightmare-fueling event, or even horrible reincarnation of bad memories happened. Just a trifle wait till Izuku wakes up. In a while, being in that state is basically how it is to be asleep. Who will blame him for not remembering it? So, this strange dream was never mentioned to any of his caretakers. This dream would occur to Izuku at least once every month. Very few times does he realize he's having that dream again. The rest he doesn't even realize it happened or that he had the dream before, though it does bring a sense of familiarity. Because each time it was the same thing, a whole bunch of nothing, crudely symbolic of his life and how he was existing without really doing much. He just lived with barely a purpose, no sports, no clubs, no after-school activities that weren't going to the hero-dedicated streets or market, and a dream which at the time seemed way out of his realm of capabilities. In correlation with his life, that dream never changed. Time continued to pass by uneventfully, until, like every other night, Izuku floated aimlessly in the void he was encased in. It was on its way of being another forgettable dream, destined to be an afterthought for how uneventful it is. That was until a slight cracking sound rang out inside Izuku's imprisonment. He didn't know where it came from as nearly all of his senses were nullified, but it surprised him that he finally heard something. That amazement was quickly followed by another sound. Thump. Is that thumping I hear? Izuku thought to himself, it couldn't be, from where would it be coming from? Thump, thump, thump. More cracking noises echoed. It was definitely thumping noises he was hearing. This time he could feel vibrations coming from above him. Is someone breaking me out? Wait, does that mean there's an outside to this place? Thump, thump, thud. What was that last sound? It hit differently. Crackle, crack. The cracking sound became more audible, until, crack. Suddenly from the pure black darkness that surrounded him, a tiny crack of light peered through. Light, light. He cheered, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. A ray of hope. My, look at what you did. Might have overdone it a bit that time, said a voice. Is that a person's voice? Izuku thought there was an outside world to where he was. A red eye poked in the crack, looking around a bit before setting its gaze in Izuku's direction. Oh ho, sorry about that, called out the modest voice from the crack. I wanted to do some work here. I'll leave if you want. No, don't. Izuku screams, immediately being surprised that he can now speak. HM. The voice called out again. What did you want me to do? Answering quickly, Izuku knew this was his only shot at breaking out of wherever he was. You can continue whatever you were doing. I don't mind at all. Are you sure? Cracks are forming and I don't think you'll want to burst out. It's fine. I kinda wanna burst out of here, so please continue. The red eye stared at him for a while before reciting from the crack and saying, okay, thud, 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 crack. The P&D continued, creating more and more crack in his containment. I'm finally going to be able to see the outside. With his returned body function, Izuku started flailing around the best he could, hoping to increase the crumble rate. Thud, crackle, thud, crack. He can see the cracks spreading vertically on what was encapsulating him. The more cracks that appeared, the more of his senses returned to him. He could hear, he could see, and even started being able to wiggle his fingers. Crack, crack. The cracks began to grow on their own. It was almost complete. Here it comes, prepare yourself. The tender voice told him. Thank you for the help. Izuku called out, by the way, what were you doing here anyway? As the cracks reached to the bottom of the void, the voice answered him. I was just P&D some matcha. You want some? Before Izuku could answer, the ground beneath him suddenly broke away, sending the boy plummeting down below. At first, he was relieved about this as it meant he had his freedom until he looked down and saw he was falling from literal thousands of feet in the air. Oh well, I tried to warn you. The voice of his helper shouted cheerful for what could be his death drop, looking up at them as he fell. He would see only a single white bunny with red eyes and a specially designed bucket in front of them. It was sitting on a bright white orb, mostly likely what was imprisoning him for so long. It had a lot of cracks from his escape. The friendly bunny waved him goodbye as he fell, calling out to him, come back anytime if you want a snack, I'll have the moon fixed by then. Wait, moon. Izuku thought. Dread quickly followed that revelation. I'm falling from the moon. Screaming for his life from his helplessness in saving himself from this fall, he kinda forgot that this was all a dream. His excitement of finding out there was more to this dream brought him right back into a suspension of disbelief dreams usually have. Also, who would take an unexpected fall from the moon as an inconsequential event even if it was a dream? Falling through clouds can be pretty frightening. He didn't want to look down, but something caught his eye, a huge red and gold palace whose tip barely reaches the clouds. He mistakenly took it as a mountain at first, from its layers and layers of different platforms. Though his vision was blurry because of the fall, he saw that each layer had giant red torii gates near the edge facing the same direction. The beauty of them drew his attention away from his worries for a moment. He remembered those gates. He saw them on a family vacation once. His views of the gates were quickly cut off by tall bamboo trees. This place has bamboo trees as well. Izuku wondered. This was certainly an interesting place he ended up in. It entices him until he realizes that falling down past trees means that he's almost reached the ground. There was only a split second for Izuku to turn and see the ground before the strong surface filled his entire end. What? Katsuki would enter into the room the two shared, only to see our adorable fox boy on the ground, tangled in his bedsheets. The two stared at each other in silence before Katsuki bluntly says, the FCK. Be bad dream. Izuku replied quickly. He stumbled to get out of his entangled sheets to make his bed. His mind still wandered about what he just saw in that dream. What was it? Did he roll all six and got an alternative route or something? That never happened before in the dream and he doesn't know what sparked it. What kind of FCKING bad dream were you having? Boy, KATSUKI. Don't think I didn't FC King hear you. Watch your DMN language, shouted Mitsuki from downstairs. It's amazing how she went years without realizing her hypocrisy. That's parenting in a nutshell. What you hag? I didn't say nothing. Katsuki yelled back. It's really just a vicious cycle. You think I quote him deaf? If the boot fits. Don't get smart with me. You want to add another 2 weeks to your grounding. Thought so. The blonde mumbled something under his breath before turning his attention back to Izuku. Anyways, breakfast is ready, nerd. Come get some. After finally freeing himself, Izuku nodded, telling him he'll join them once he made his bed and brushed his teeth. A week passed since he had that dream and the day he got attacked by a villain, then get saved by a bunny girl, then get attacked by another villain that was slimy, then get saved again by All Might, then get attacked by the slime villain again, and then get saved by All Might again. The most frightening part was how that was the simplified version of what happened that day. Both boys were promptly grounded almost as soon as they got home, being baited into a false sense of security by saying how relieved they were that they came home safe, and then severely scolded them till the sunset. Most of the chastise were toward Katsuki since he was responsible for both of them, which was why he was going to be grounded till the end of the school semester. But Izuku stepped in, trying to take some responsibility for his part in the whole mess. 2 of the 3 times Izuku got attacked by a villain wasn't even directly Katsuki's fault or intention. One of them was the greenet willingly jumping into danger, and the occurrence where it was Katsuki's fault wasn't brought up because Izuku thought it was best not to unnecessarily add more fuel to the fire by telling them about it. Partly out of guilt, and partly as payback for the day Izuku wanted to run away. The blonde made some excuse for Izuku's disappearance from the house to their parents to ease their worries without a need for confrontation. In the end, Izuku got his first ever grounding from someone that wasn't even his mother. It would last a week with the additional duty of having to help do the dishes and setting up the table. Compared to his contemporary, this was a slap on the wrist. Mitsuki was extremely harsh in punishing her own son, unlike his usual behavior problems that could get ignored. This occasion could have had horrible physical repercussions which were only avoided by pure luck. He was grounded for 2 months, his allowance was cut, he was banned from playing video games, and had to help his dad in the man's weekly house renovations. It convinced Izuku that Katsuki's paranoia of what his mom would do to him wasn't such an overreaction. She might have actually killed him if he did come back home completely fine. Silence defined the current relationship between Izuku and Katsuki. They haven't talked once they got home. The only time they had something close to a conversation was Katsuki telling Izuku about seeing his ears and tail move during the slime villain attack. Sadly, since then Izuku seemed to have lost the ability to move them. He wasn't saddened by this, as it meant that there was a chance for him to awaken them again. He even started letting his fox ears hang out of his hair in public, only keeping his tail tied up as it did get in the way. Outside of a few words, they've gotten even more tight-lipped with each other, a direct contrast from what you'd expect two people who sleep in the same room would have. Izuku easily understood why Katsuki wasn't in a talking mood. He got slapped with 4 times the punishment Izuku got. It'd be stupid to think he would. The greenette had his reasons as well. His mind dwindled on what the explosive blonde said to him that day. Every time he looked at him, those words echoed in his head, driving him away. It irked him every time he's reminded of it. The blonde's insults usually don't hinder his day. This time was different. Those words were laced with a rage unseen before. It did its job screwing with him. He couldn't get it out of his head. It wasn't as if they were all baseless accusations. He admits that he has a lot of issues that need to be worked on. It's more on the DLVRY of it. Shouting at him was one thing. Izuku was fine with that, considering how he ended up in a villain attack because of his obsession. That didn't excuse hitting him in the stomach or destroying the notebook he spent years working on. Only exhaustion and almost dying 3 different times, 4 if you count losing consciousness when he was holding onto All Might's leg without his knowledge high into the air, kept him from bringing up the topic again. Such an act was deemed a bit too petty by the fox boy to do at the time. Now a week passed and he wished he didn't wait. The appropriate timing for such talk has passed since everyone was moving on from that day's event. That didn't mean this was the end of the road for what happened. At least Izuku wouldn't let it end like that. For now, Izuku had other things to do. With him finally being able to leave the house again, there was one person he had to meet. He brought out his phone to text someone. Izuku, I'm heading out in a few minutes. Where do you want to meet again? Mr. Number 1, Dagaba Municipal Beach Park. Since the day All Might told him that of his belief that he can become a hero, Izuku has been dying to be able to leave the house again, as the number 1 hero promised to train him. As soon as he got permission to leave home, he went straight to the beach, where All Might told him the details of the current plan of how the training would go. Your goal is to get into the top hero school in the country, UA University. You've got a little under 4 years before the entrance exam. By then I'll make sure your body will be able to handle the quirk I'll give you. All Might explain, which is good timing since it'll take a couple of years to build up your body to handle one for all stockpile of power. Before I give it to you, I'll need to make sure your body is ready first. His first task toward this goal, clean up the entire beach in 10 months. While the task was daunting, Izuku was proud of him that he was committing to working toward his dream. Speaking of dreams, he had that weird dream again. This time, things were drastically different. He didn't start trapped in a black void. Instead, the first thing he saw was the moon he broke out of. The hole he left behind was still there. It was strong to see, but there was still a tiny outline on the moon showing the person who freed him was still P&D some Machai. He must have fallen into some kind of vast swamp, as he found every step he would take sluggish, to the point where he got as little done in the dream as he was doing before. The only difference was that at least he had a bunch of bamboos to look at. It was quite disappointing that breaking out of one tedious chamber only led to a second tedious slugfest that went nowhere. Was the swamp endless? 2 days into his training, he was currently on a jog. Outside of his main goal, he was also given many workout routines to do on his own. One of these included a daily run. Right as he was passing by a park, another unexpected encounter with a certain person. If it isn't Broccoli Kid, I mean Izuku, you're just showing up everywhere, aren't ya? Miruko told him when they noticed each other. She was seated on a park bench in a wonderful black LTHR lace-up jacket, and a red plastic bag was resting at her side. Miruko. Ah, I didn't expect you to be here, Izuku stammered, stopping in his tracks when he reached the bench for a breather. I was supposed to hang out with someone here, but they're running extremely late because of traffic. What a bust. Now I'm here on my butt doing nothing for the next hour. She exclaimed, aggravated, as people who don't keep promises are always a pet peeve of hers. Her beaming red eyes then turned its attention directly on the fox boy in front of her, and a wide smile appeared on her face. But since you're here, you can be my entertainment till then. The boy shivered down to his tail. The way she glared at him was the kind of attention he hasn't gotten from a girl that didn't live with him since he was 10, and it was just her being interested in his small foxtail. This bunny girl, she wanted him personally, and that's something Izuku never thought was possible. Knowing that his responsibilities should be on his training, Izuku replied, I would like to, but I'm on a jog right now. You can take a quick break. Miruko insisted, patting the spot next to her. Besides, you're the only one in a 100-yard radius who I have an interest in talking to. Yeah, but, come on, she interrupted, using her left hand to grab him and pull him toward the bench. While Izuku was mentally fussing over their legs tapping against each other once in a while, Miruko told him, we can catch up over some snacks. I got some matcha ice cream, as she pulled out 2 orange-colored dough-looking s from her bag and offered one to the boy. Did you finally find the carrot-flavored ice cream? The green had asked, looking at the matcha's color texture as he accepted it. You know, just because my animal quirk like carrots, doesn't mean I'll always go for it. Of course, I just usually associate carrots with Bun. The fox boy stopped himself before he went too far. Did you just call me a bunny? Oh, because you think I'm a bunny, that means I must love carrots and can't get enough of them. No, Izuku quickly replied, remembering what happened to the last guy who called her a bunny. He was smart enough to only call her that in his head and not out loud unless he wanted her refined legs that once saved him to be the ones that end him as well. Buns, I was going to say buns. When I was a child my mom always got me carrot-flavored buns and I loved them. That's why I ask so much about it. He quickly ate the one given to him to make his lie more believable, to show a sense of delight in the flavor and would get a nice surprise. You actually got the. You're just lucky that I happened to pick the carrot flavor today. Miruko interrupted again, a bit embarrassed. She curled her lips into an aggravated pout as she nibbled on her own. I guess even a broken clock is correct twice a day, so what have you been up to? All Might would shake his head in shame knowing the boy would put his training on hold just to speak to a girl, but at least he tried. Besides, she was pretty persuasive in getting to stop. After Izuku filled her in on the last week of his life, Miruko chuckled happily. Only a week. DMN, you got off easy. I guess it barely felt like a grounding anyways since I could still watch TV. And they didn't even take away my cell phone. They didn't. Huh, why haven't you called me then? About that. You lost it. No. Well, yes, more like it got destroyed with the rest of my school clothes the day you gave it to me. Oh yeah, honestly didn't know what I was expecting after you were having your epic battle against that slime freak shirtless. It wasn't that impressive. Izuku's eyes drew itself toward the ground as he scratched his head trying to wave off the comment. Who wouldn't be impressed seeing a 5-foot fox boy lunge himself into danger to save his brother? I practically saw the crowd's jaw drop as they witnessed your feeble body fly in the air. It was practically like watching David and Goliath live. A pink blush quickly spread across his face. It was a lot rougher, but it felt like he was being pampered by Katsuki's mom again. He began doing his bad habit of mumbling nonsense as he tried to figure out a proper response to what's going on. After a while, he finally said something comprehensible. He's not my brother. He's not. Miruko repeated, leaning against her hand as her interest increased. That's strange. You acted like, wait, you're telling me you did all that CRP for someone who's not even a part of your family. What's wrong with that? Our mom knew each other for a long time and we have lived in the same house for years. I wasn't going to let him die there without doing anything. I see, that makes sense now. Your lesbian moms would be pretty disappointed if they lost one of their boys. Why no. My mom isn't a lesbian, she got married to my dad. And, isn't that enough? No. In fact, that might even make her more guilty. What straight woman goes from a husband and a son to living with her longtime female friend in the same house? And not like some TRBBNG here and there. I don't even want to know what that is. Trust me, it's fine, I don't judge. We all get what that roommates in a single-bedroom apartment for years thing go. I know a few girls who swing that way as well. Stop. I don't want that image stuck in my head. My friend's mom is still married ... to a man happily. I mean, some couples can be freaky like that. Oh my god. And at best that only clear your mom's friend's name. That doesn't mean your mom doesn't want to joust some clams. Oh my god. Izuku's tomato face was completely buried into his hands, swch rapidly between covering his face so a girl wouldn't see how furred he was or his ears so he wouldn't hear any more of what was furring him. Trying his best to keep out the very haunting images Miruko was slowly stuffing in. The dark-skinned girl hunched over as she bellowed out in laughter. Her round hips were centimeters from slipping off the bench and she told him that her hitting the floor strong would have made her stop. Thank your God that we met today, I needed a good laugh. She cried, slapping the thigh of the boy who she just permanently stuck a cursed image of his mother in his head. She threw her body up against the back of the bench as she caught her breath, letting her well-endowed cest be on display through a fine outline through her jacket and white t-shirt. Izuku caught a glimpse of this and quickly snapped his head away before she noticed, not wanting anything else RTC to fill his mind before his brain melts. Finally recovering from her hysterical laughter, she spoke again. I'm kidding, though I'm betting a cold 20 that it was at least on the table at a time. Staring off in the distance of the park, Izuku's eyes looked mortified as he muttered, I hope I never get an answer to that. Meh, who knows, best to find out about your parents' skeletons early. Knowing an issue exists helps kill ignorance and make it a hell of a lot easier to know what to improve in yourself, though you seem to already be doing that. It's not much, but at least you seem to be attempting to build your body a bit. Maybe if another villain attacks it'll be less David and Goliath, and more Goliath versus. I don't know Bruce Lee. No, too skilled, a hobbit. something small but with average to above average strength. Thanks, I guess. Yeah, Miruko responded as she quickly checked her phone. That was my friend. They'll be here in a few minutes. About time. You can continue your run. Thanks for staying with me for the wait. I couldn't say no with you. He gave a chunky laugh while standing up. The second time she had dragged him into socializing with her had some humor to it. His open-mouthed laugh gave the bunny a chance to see his fangs, which reminded her of a question she wanted to ask, calling it out to him just as he turned around. By the way, why are you hiding the fact that you had an animal quirk? His body instantly stopped in its tracks and stiffened. He took a breath before looking back and calmly answered, I kinda found them awkward to deal with. They get in the way of everything. Nodding her head, she replied, Gotcha, getting used to your new animal quirks. Pun not intended. Once it really starts manifesting was always a struggle. If you ever need advice or someone to talk to about those issues, you got my number again. Try not to lose it this time. I promise I won't. Having that number became useful to the Reynard's esteem. While he couldn't ask about much seeing as most of his animal limbs don't work, hope was at a high knowing there was a contact with someone who can sorta relate to him on dealing with animal-like biology. They never talked long or about anything important since Izuku didn't have a relevant problem that he didn't already have a solution for. Yet, it was something he made sure to do at least once a week or two. It blew his mind that he was talking to a girl so often. That wasn't through some forum that was arguing if All Might's body is setting an unrealistic expectation on men, and whether it was a good or bad thing. It was the thought of wanting to be as strong as she was with the end goal of getting to All Might's level which made Izuku work way harder than he was supposed to, going beyond the regimen given to him. This took a heavy toll on his body to the point where he almost destroyed it and needed to take a full day of rest to recover. With an inability to go outside because of his sore muscles and not being on speaking terms with the only person his age, he spent a good chunk of the day texting his new furry friend. Miruko, you RLEFC kept up your body. Izuku, I tried to get stronger way too soon so I overdid my workout. My whole body is sore. Miruko, PFFFT, XD. Izuku, hey. I'm in real pain here, I can barely move. Miruko, slap some ice on dem boys and you'll be okay hand. Miruko, also did you ask about the mom thing yet? Izuku, OMG no. It went back and forth between Miruko trying to convince him that he's being overdramatic and should have more steam in him, with Izuku insisting that he doesn't. The most memorable part was when later she sent him a picture of her in jogging clothes with the caption, and my route today was passing by your area, we could have met if you were lucky. That was the day Izuku almost killed himself just to go jogging with a girl. He didn't make it far, in fact, he almost fainted just getting to a place he knew she'll pass by. He luckily got there first, giving him time and a profitable situation to make an alibi to give once she arrives. You made it, I thought you wouldn't show. Did you really want to see me that badly? Well, you know, I just realized you were right that I did have steam left for a short run. Sure. So you ready to go on that run? Actually, I just finished my run, like a few minutes ago, and I just stuck around because I was wondering where you were. The fallacy of his lie seemed more obvious than he originally thought as Miruko stared at him for a while with a smug grin stretched across her face. What? Izuku asked, a nervous sweat dripped down his face. You're so full of SHT, dude. She exclaimed before bursting out in laughter. She was kind enough to give Izuku a stick to use as a cane for his walk of shame back home as she continued with her jog. Streams of tears flowed out of his eyes, both from the pain and the humiliation. The next few months were filled with many hardships, but pleasant moments were sprinkled in here and there. That dream he's been having were the same, but as time went by, it became easier and easier to move through the swamp. While technically he hasn't accomplished much or learned any new skills that weren't how to work out, he felt much more alive now than he has been for the last decade. Then the day happened, surprising even the expectation All Might himself. He cleaned the entire beach. His first hurdle has been overcome, and as promised, All Might deemed his body worthy of receiving one for all. Eat this. Excuse me, what? He ended up choking on the hair. Izuku kinda wished he was told ahead of time about the method he was going to receive it through. Then he could have brought a snack or at least a water bottle. It would have been quite the tragic but laughable thing if the worst happened. All Might's chosen successor died receiving his power by choking on the thing that gave him it. He didn't feel any different after eating it, but All Might assured him that he had gotten it. It was a bit vague, but Izuku just thought it meant he had to sleep it off. Drifting off into a dream again. The boy's eyes snapped open again. The first thing he did was look up to see if the moon had been fixed yet. It wasn't. He wasn't sure if that meant that barely any in dream time went by since he broke out, or if that rabbit was a world-class procrastinator. Then again, repairing a moon doesn't seem like a task that can be done in a school year, but then why did he make it sound a facile task? Overconfidence. Either way, he can't spend all his dream time thinking about it. He has to make as much progress as possible to get through this swamp. While it may be hopeless now, he thought the exact thing back when he was enclosed in that moon. It may take a while to get somewhere, but as long as he can reach it, he'll be happy. Unlike before, the swamp barely slowed his process. The only issue was finding a goal to head toward. He was sure he headed in the way he saw the red gates, but he couldn't check. The bamboo that infested the swamp were too tall and thick to see through yet. They would always break when he tried to climb them. He is doing this blind. But then a tiny but bright rainbow light peered through all the bamboo. In such an aimless place, this may have well been a godsend calling to him. He felt alluded to it as if someone was calling to me, and without literally no other goal in sight, he followed it. It was all a dream anyway, at worst he'll just wake up. He wandered endlessly for what felt like hours. Thankfully the light never moved or went away. It was always there, radiantly brimming such a calling presence. The next thing he knew, he stopped feeling the swamp at his feet. He looked down to see if he just lost the feeling in his legs, but no, he was no longer in the swamp. He looked back to see if he could find the swamp, but the bamboo blocked all view and he couldn't find it anymore. Something to investigate at another time, he continued his pursuit of a life as it slowly led him out of the forest of bamboo. It felt great walking on grass again after spending so long in a murky texture. Soft blades of grass might as well have been a massage chair. Almost as soon as he got out of the forest of bamboo did the glowing light disappear, which worried Izuku, but he decided to continue going in the direction he last saw it. His trailing of the light finally brought him to what looked like a Sankei-styled house. Right behind it, a giant red torii gate. He finally made it. Looking around, he saw the clear dark blue lake by the house, the many different kinds of plants that filled the garden, and even the aroma was pleasant to breathe in. Approaching the house, the door was already open, leaving anyone the ability to look inside. There he saw the back of a man in a green kimono hakama sitting down. There was a symbol on the back in the shape of 3 claw marks, and his hair covered by a kind of scarf that was wrapped around his head. The most eye-catching of them all was the fluffy black tail wagging behind him. To be clear, Eugen, you can stockpile power, huh? That's interesting. He spoke with a vigilant, strong yet caring voice. Izuku couldn't see his face, but he could see that the man wasn't allowed. Across from him was an albino person with barely any form. He radiated the same kind of rainbow light that led him out of the swamp. "Hello," he says, trying to get their attention to get included. His heartbeat became rapid. Years of anticipation and longing were bubbling up in his stomach, and was raring to burst out. It seemed to have gotten the one brimming with light's attention. The one in the kimono didn't immediately turn around. Instead, he reached to his side to pick on a mask shaped like a fox before turning toward Izuku. The blue marking on it displayed the same 3-line cheek design that was on his face. The masked man left his seat to approach the boy, mumbling under his breath, "A troublesome boy, you have kept me waiting here. Now you brought a gift. I've waited a long time for you, and now it seemed like you brought quite the troublesome guest to my doorsteps." He already caused quite a lot to happen. As he got closer, Izuku noticed how he couldn't see the color of his eyes through the mask, and his tail seemed to have resided itself hidden inside of the kimono. When he got close to the boy, he placed a hand on his chest, continuing, "Sorry kiddo, I might need you to go for a while as I have a nice conversation with this little prowler. Kinda excited to reach the Ana. You can come back once we're done." "Wait," Izuku called out, "can I at least know who you are first? I might get lost again and need to know who to search for." "That's an easy one," the masked man replied. He gets on eye level with the boy, revealing a pair of green eyes behind the mask before continuing. "We are the exact same. You and I have forged a path to project our needs. What? I am thou, and thou art I. From different realms we are bonded, forming a bridge that connects reality from the supernatural and our cognition. What is needed will form here, created on this land, a safe space for you and me. A representation that's real but non-existence." "What?" The masked person sighed before pushing Izuku off into the air with a single strike. As the boy fell, the man called out, "Don't fear being lost. We will always meet again. We're connected here. Also, learn what AFC King Haiku is baka." That was the last thing he heard before his body crashed into the lake. Izuku snapped awake. He sighed to himself. While he was happy to finally get past the swamp, he was immediately hit with what seemed like another roadblock. A frown came across his face. The next time he'll be able to go back will most likely be in a month. Such a long wait to have after finally seeing the treasure box. Oh well, I've waited longer for less. Getting out of bed, he felt his throat was quite dry and headed to the kitchen for a glass of water. The after effect of finishing that beach was killer on his body. Every part of his body was sore and stiff. The most annoying was how jittery his jaw felt. On the way, he scratched his head that has been itching him ever since he woke up. Perhaps a bit too strong as he winced in pain. His nails suddenly jabbed into him and they felt sharper than before. "Morning, Mon. Morning, Auntie Bakugo," he said, passing by the 2 ladies that were chatting over a cup of coffee. "Oh, Izuku, I told you before, you don't need to keep calling me Aunt." Inko screamed and the shattering of a cup against the ground was heard. Hearing this snapped Izuku out of his mourning, turning toward his breathed mother. What? Why your tail?" "My tail," Izuku repeated. He hated it when something got caught on his tail. Since it couldn't move, he had to basically break his neck to get a good look at it. Thankfully, it was easier to see his tail as it moved to his side when Izuku thought about checking it out. "What are you talking about? It's fine." It was at that moment that Izuku realized both that he had naturally moved his tail, but that his tailpiece had grown a considerably great amount, and was now fully covered in green fur. It was just as fluffy and big as his dad's own from a photo he saw of him during his schooling days. "Your tail, my tail." Your ears. My ears. Izuku reached up to touch his ears. Just like his tail, they seemed to have fully grown out as well. What's wrong with my ears? Your ears. My ears. Boy, what the FCK is with all the yelling and the FC King warning. Katsuki shouted from upstairs. In a couple of angry stomps, the explosive blonde was in the kitchen as well, and his eyes widened like a deer in headlights when he saw an Izuku with his fully grown tail, ears, nails, and fangs. His account testified that they were not there yesterday. The FCK. Is that what all the rolling around groaning last night was? I thought you were throwing jacks. Katsuki, I told you before to watch your FC King mouth. Mitsuki yelled at her son. Why does this house always have yelling going on? Masaru Bakugo, Katsuki's father, asked as he entered the kitchen. He only tilted his head slightly to the side to see it would most likely be Izuku's newly formed assets. Well, that's interesting. I know, I'm curious to how it happened. Mitsuki continued to scream. Yeah, the FCK happened. Katsuki asked, ignoring his mom's earlier warning. You're asking me. The spotlight boy replied, Mom, what's going on? Did this happen to Dad? I don't know. Inko confessed, tears streamed out of her eyes, but a wide smile was across her face as she tried to fan herself. I'm just so. Thud. The room went silent as everyone stared at the proud mother who fainted on the ground. My mom. Izuku shouted, trying his best to keep the running Gigi alive. Sadly, or thankfully in the case of Masaru, the shouting had run its course. Everyone was too focused on the boy's revised fox look or wondering if his mom might need to work on her overdramatics. Growth, a two-edged sword. Each inch gained has a drawback. Nothing comes weightless. How will the boy who spent his entire life with a part of him stuck in an embryonic state deal with its sudden rapid growth, and all the issues that'll come with it? Currently, a lot better than one would think after that misleading beginning. So cute, were the words a gleeful Mitsuki repeatedly shouted. She was aggressively cuddling with the newly enhanced fox boy with more affection than a little girl getting her first teddy bear. Oh my god, you're so adorable. The busty blonde woman was always the most consistently encouraging figure to Izuku concerning his special quirk, effectively making him have some sense of empowerment by his abnormalities. It wasn't much and was the size of a toothpick made out of balsa wood, but it was more than what his mother had managed to do for him. She had always hoped that the boy would one day come into his own, even with his condition, able to live happily and freely without worrying about what others thought of him or forcing a superficial standard on himself. Maybe one day his ears would grow out completely, but by then he wouldn't be dependent on getting it. She had gotten her wish and was happily enjoying it. I can snuggle with you all day long. Please let me do it, please. The amount of absolute joy leaking from her voice would make you think that a teenage girl had just gotten a new car for her 16th birthday. It was that I'll do anything you want right now kind of happiness. Masaru took a mental note on what to get her in case he was ever short on time for their anniversary. Izuku was also enjoying himself involuntarily, dubious due to her excitement. The grown woman didn't realize she was smothering the young 15-year-old's head with her bosom. Her rosemary scent intoxicated him as his red face was pressed firmly against her bountiful cess like a pillow. He could have fallen asleep right there if it wasn't for the fact that he had recently just woken up. And the suffocating feeling. Also, the shock from having his tail and animal ears grow all overnight kept his BLD pumping. Though that could be from other factors. Long story short, the boy was having a divine experience. As Izuku discovered that heaven can be achieved through the loving and caring embrace of a glamorous mother, the rest of the Bakugos are left to tidy up the mess made by the faint of heart and co. Following her collapse, shattered bits of ceramic, brown muck that adults call coffee, and the unconscious body of the mother littered the floor. The Bakumen looked down at the heap left to them as if they were a demolition cleanup crew eyeing their next project, tackling every minor house chore as a home renovation. The elder of the two spoke first about their plan of action. It seems quite the dilemma has appeared on our hands. All right, so while I safely extract the civilian, you cautiously pick out the obvious hazard material before clearing the remnants and mopping up the fluids. If you can get that done, then I should be able to make a final round trip to make sure nothing was left behind. Old man, can you FC King stop? What did I do? I'm still mentally recovering from that month I spent fixing the house with you, acting like we're construction workers. You make everything sound bigger than it is, throwing in a bunch of stupid lingos. It's cleaning up a broken cup and you work at a FC King advertising company. Speak normally. I just wanted to spice things up, add a bit of excitement to things. Then take your butt to the movies. You want to know what it sounds like when you make everything sound so dramatic. You sound like those delusional role-players that try to hide how much of a virgin they are by speaking like they're Shakespeare all the time. Masaru was once again reminded how strong controlling Katsuki would be without his iron-willed wife. Honestly, with his soft heart, if he didn't have Mitsuki, then his belligerent son would probably have caused him to curl up in a from his words alone. Unfortunately, she was too distracted indulging herself, leaving him to deal with the eruptive teen alone. Duly noted. Let's just work on cleaning the clutter, he stated, picking Inko up off the ground. I thought I was supposed to pick up the mess, was Katsuki's snarky reply. Katsuki, have some restraint. This is someone's mother. You know your mother always says that one day someone is going to punch you in the face when you least expect it if you keep that up, and while I don't support it, I won't be surprised if it happens. That'll be the day, the teen mumbled under his breath as he left to go find the cleaning supplies. His father also left to put Inko in her room. Mitsuki took the time she had alone with Izuku to calm herself a bit in order to probe him with questions. You sure you don't know what caused this, Izuku? Yes, I'm sure, it kinda just happened. Well, this is a very colossal thing to just happen. You didn't take anything strange, did you? Course not. I wouldn't be as surprised as I was when it got pointed out if I knew I did something to cause it. Thoughts about eating All Might's hair came to mind, but there was no way in hell that Izuku would attempt to explain that situation, even if he wasn't bound by a promise to the number one hero to keep a secret. Not to mention that dream he had, too many unsolved questions with that one, and he'd been having it for years before he even came into contact with All Might. Speaking about it now would only serve to make the entire situation seem even more ridiculous, even if it did have something to do with it. He would keep the events close to his heart for now. You sure you didn't do anything that might be related to this? You don't have to keep secrets from me. Yes. The more mature blonde thought to herself, he's usually a terrible liar when it comes to me unless he grew out of that as well. That last one was obviously a lie, meaning he remembered something he did that could have induced his rapid growth, but judging by the looks of it and when he started to lie, whatever he did was in no way supposed to trigger this. Then again, what did cause this? Her concern spawned from recent topics that at the moment had been pretty overlooked on the news. There were talks about a possible resurgence of a certain supplement from the underground that low-grade villains usually use to bolster their relatively weak quirks. It wasn't a stretch by a mile to suspect a boy who lived over a decade with a weak underdeveloped quirk might turn to a more desperate means to get over the hurdle. Mitsuki eyed his mouth. It was strong to see into it as the boy made it a habit few years prior to speak and position his mouth in a way to hide as much of his fangs as possible. Ironically, this caused a hilarious phase where his pronunciation of many words got skewed till he MSDR the technique. Luckily, his furred face left his lips parted enough for the woman to peer through and see what she wanted. His tongue was its regular light pink color. He was clean. Glad that theory was debunked, a soft smile spread across her face. It wasn't as if Mitsuki saw Izuku so lowly to seek such a desolate answer. She knew he was a good kid who didn't have much guidance in life. She feared that a bad influence could have easily stirred him on a bad path by disguising it as a viable option by using his dreams to become a hero against him. While her fears were warranted from what she knew, it was ultimately unneeded. Since Izuku knew at a young age that his hybrid traits weren't the effects of a quirk mixed with the feelings he has about his BRTH, he never bothered with any of those quirk improvement-based propaganda. Ironically, his uncensored upbringing and paradox thoughts kept him from falling into this trap. If this information was kept hidden from him or if his condition was an actual quirk, it would possibly be a different story. Her longing to find out the cause of his flourishing was immense, but without any solid proof that devious play had taken place, she couldn't push for an answer, at least not with Izuku. While he's terrible at lying, he'll stick to it till he willingly gives up. That must be from hanging around Katsuki too much. They always cover each other's, but whenever they do something they know is problematic. That boy can never be influential when I want him to. As a mother, I should be disappointed that he's teaching such an innocent kid to be a better liar. But personally, I'm kinda happy that the brat, in an unethical and unintentional way, helped the boy get better at sticking to something instead of giving up as soon as a plan goes awry, even if it is for lying. For now, Mitsuki is going to take this phenomenon the same way everyone else in the house was, as an unexpected miracle to be enjoyed. But if one print of foul play is found, the gates of hell will rise and drag in any and all people involved in it, picking the foxy boy's tail that's been minding its own business being alive. The older blonde had a pet. Okay, as long as I get to play with this I'm happy. Her eloquent finger glided through the green fur, each velvety hair brushed against her soft skin as he felt the warmth radiating from her hands wrap around his furry limb. Please don't mess with my tail, Izuku pleaded. Why, I'm only petting it. I promise I won't squeeze it. It's not that. It must be an effect from it just being grown, as every nerve in his tail sent an electrifying sensation throughout his body at even the tiniest of touches. His bones slowly become ungodly sensitive, as if they might collapse under his weight despite being seated, and he shivered like a child outside during winter. During his endeavors, an uninvited moan that sounded awfully like a purr was created. This noise was the kind that sounded like an exhausted Salaryman experiencing his first professional massage. It was muffled as he had his mouth closed, but it wasn't enough to escape the sharp hearing of the termagant woman. The room went silent for a second. Did I really just do that? Were the rightfully dramatic thoughts of the fox boy. Surprised herself, a grinning Mitsuki asked, was it because you were enjoying yourself? No. His tail wagged excitedly in the blonde's hand, a dog who's been given its first treat and wanted to get another right after. I take this as a yes then, the older blonde asked with a smug smirk after seeing the tail's reaction. Traitor. Izuku immediately calls out his rouge appendage. This amount of betrayal had only been felt once before, when the McCall Might nuggets he had at a carnival when he was young was average at best. and not plus ultra like the advertisement said. I take back all the wishes of prospering I made for you. Don't be too strong on it, it can't help being what it is, the mother stated, stroking his tail slowly. This is why I wanted you to stop. That's it. That's not even bad. Trust me, I've made more come out of people. No, but why I just don't like how ticklish it is. Come on please, just let me do it a bit longer. Don't take this away from me so soon. And no, it's my tail, replied Izuku as he snatches his tail out of her hands to prevent any more pampering. Something fell off though. Did he hear something tear? Almost as if someone ripped a piece of paper. His eyes quickly glanced at his surroundings for a cause but found nothing. It wasn't until he looked at his current company did he realize the mistake he made. His nails were always sharp, they weren't like razors, but more than once did he encounter a situation where they caused him some trouble. Since he learned how to forcibly retract his nails, he's been able to manage them, greatly reducing complications they could cause. Unfortunately today this spark of growth also affected how his nails extend and retract, so when he went to snatch his tail back they extended at quite literally the worst time ever to exist in his lifetime. His swift movement caused them to easily slice through the fabric of Mitsuki's morning top. Are you okay? Izuku asked with dilated eyes, his agitated voice, ragged breath, and shaking fingers that were being hidden behind his back were apparent. Please not again. His sincere reaction was quickly followed by a polar opposite dopey red face. Thankfully Mitsuki's skin would still be as flawless as ever. It was nothing short but a miracle that none of his nails dug deep enough to graze her body at all. When he took a closer look to check and see if he had hurt her, his concerns were gracefully rewarded by the universe with a great view of the bountiful rack she had, peering through the tears he made. This would be a good time to mention that Izuku has a slight crush on Mitsuki. If this was an anime, the couch would be soaked with BLD. I'm fine, lucky this was the worst that happened, replied the blonde as she examined her shirt. Not like I liked this shirt anyways. That's good. Izuku muffled, covering his mouth to hide the goofy looking on his face. He struggled to keep his eyes up when they were being magnetically pulled down. His efforts were in vain as Mitsuki instantly recognized what was going on. This wasn't even close to her first rodeo with this kind of thing. Putting a hand over the tear to cover it up so Izuku can both physically and mentally get back control over himself, she got off the couch. Turning toward the stairwell she tells him, oh well, I was going to get changed eventually since I have work soon. Guess now would be a perfect time. See ya. Before walking off with a smile on her face. Izuku sighed as soon as she left. Fortune saved him this time, but it was only the beginning of issues he began having since his growth. Those nails of his made it difficult to come into contact with anything. They kept on extending and retracting on their own at random intervals. He couldn't handle a brush without issue. He accidentally shredded his bedsheets one night when he turned too much in his sleep. Hordes of his clothes got ruined and he had to avoid wearing any of his favorite stuff. Hero garments aren't cheap, especially if you get the ones made with good quality material. He had to constantly remind himself to be mindful whenever he's at the dinner table to avoid unconsciously scratching up the table, and wrapping duct tape around his fingers before bed quickly became a norm. A new ability Izuku noticed he had gotten from his rapid growth was a more sensitive sense of smell. It wasn't too great, but he noticed that certain scents were affecting him in ways they weren't before. Taking out the trash was torture, and being around Katsuki when he returned from the gym made him feel like he was at a carnival thanks to his nitroglycerin sweat. He smelled like cotton candy. The worst of all was when he discovered he couldn't stand the smell of garlic when the family was eating garlic rice, a favorite of his. He almost wanted to cry. What do you mean you can't stand it? An enraged Katsuki shouted at the table when Izuku explained why he was covering his nostrils. I made it the same way I always do. Izuku quickly pleaded his defense. He knew how much pride Katsuki had in his cooking. No, I didn't mean the food itself, just the smell makes it strong to eat. You've been periodically begging me to make this diamond thing for weeks now. You're not going to back down now that I made it. It was a bit of an exaggeration to say that, asking, oh, are you making garlic rice? Every time Izuku saw that it was Katsuki's turn to cook and he brought out a bag of rice, but that was nothing new for the explosive teen. Boy, leave him alone. Mitsuki yelled at her son. Coming to his defense, he doesn't have to eat it. No, it's fine, Izuku said, trying to calm the situation. I'll just pinch my nose and you don't have to force yourself. But I'm not. Yes, he does. He's going to eat it and he's going to like it. I do like it. It's not the taste, my nose is just acting up. And what gives you the right to decide that? I cook the DMN food. If I remember, it's whoever makes the DMN food can make the FC King rules. And I declare that no one is allowed to leave this table until they get rid of every bit off their plate. You dare use my own words against me, brat. The future is now, old hag. I was going to eat it anyway. I don't see why there needed to be a fight over it. Were Izuku's despondent mumbles after seeing no ways to stop them. Katsuki's father looked at him with a confused look, wondering why he was acting like this. Was his first time dealing with this and he lives here. Luckily the feud ended when Mitsuki flipped the table, using Katsuki's trick of using wordplay to get around the rule. While Masaru was able to save his own and Inko's plate, everything else went with the table as the food was scattered all over the kitchen. Izuku was unfortunate enough to be covered by the very thing that caused the issue, and had to take a shower or else he couldn't breathe. When he returned to his room, he found Katsuki was also there, having retreated to his room after the joint effort of cleaning up the mess he and his mom made. It was one of the few times a suggestion from his father was listened to. Feeling a little guilty that the meal he made was mostly wasted over a simple argument over something stupid, Izuku tried to flatter him. If it means anything, you guys made me taste great. He's new at this. A deadly death stare from Katsuki quickly told him that, turning away from him as he decided it was best to leave him be. Unbeknown to him, while he was back was turned to his roommate, Katsuki was still looking in his direction, but for a different reason. The blonde's attention was directed at the furry things twitching on top of the greenet's head. He was inexplicably drawn to them, casting a spell that took away his will. Before he knew it, the ears were within his grip, and his thumb carefully brushed them. Soft was the only word that came to mind. Kaken, what are you doing? Izuku queasy asked. He was trying his best not to purr like before. Realizing what he had done prompted Katsuki to react quickly, fing the spot behind his ears shouting, "You idiot, you had some rice stuck behind your ears. Learn how to FC King clean your hair better, Deku." Okay, I get it. It was only later that day when Izuku went out and had a few more mischiefs that he decided to have a private phone call with All Might to discuss what happened. All Might, there's trouble. I think One for All did something to me. Oh my god, Izuku, I'm so sorry. I thought your body would be ready for it, but don't worry. I know some of the best doctors in the country. We will get you fixed, just don't tell. Get me fixed. Nothing is broken. My fox parts just rapidly grow overnight. Oh, thank God. For a second I thought some of your limbs might have been blown off or something. Why would they explode? I didn't even use the quirk. Wait, was that an actual possibility? We don't need to concern ourselves with trivial things right now. What about your tail again? There, Izuku explained his bizarre day to the pro hero. Was something like this supposed to happen? Kinda. I am able to maintain my muscular form through the power of One for All, but when I first got it, nothing like this occurred. Could this be because of my condition? It wouldn't be impossible, but from what I heard from my MSDR, each user of One for All usually had their own unique experience with the quirk as it develops over time. I heard a few interesting stories from my MSDR. That supposedly didn't happen to the other. I got my muscular form. It wouldn't be much of a stretch to say this is your own version of it. Still a bit strange that it manifested the literal day after you got it, but hey, that's the wonders of life. You're so calm about this that it's quite scary, seeing as this concerns something that can make me explode. I thought your brother was the one who can make things explode. He's not my brother, and don't change the subject. I'm very worried about this. Izuku took a sorrowful pause, experiencing some troubling things. One for All isn't just accelerating my physical biology, and I fear what might happen next. All Might froze as well. It was obvious something was mentally haunting him, but the number pro hero was better at physically saving people while assuring them with his smile. There's a reason why he's out in the field and not a psychologist. He didn't want to accidentally make Izuku's problems worse by giving the wrong advice on a subject he might not be too familiar with. So he came up with an idea. Don't worry, young Midoriya, I know someone. A few days later. You gotta be kidding me. Izuku thought as he came face to face with no other than Miruko once again. Izuku, you're a fox. And you're here. She said as soon as she answered the door. Instead of a warm welcoming, she seemed more peculiar about his arrival at her doorstep. What made it worse was that All Might currently wasn't with him. He was paying off the cab they took but told him to go on ahead. How did you find out where I live? Immediately realizing the implications of the situation, Izuku with a panicky voice stated, "Oh, I didn't know you lived here. I mean, I came here for something, but not for you. It just so happens that my destination was at the place you were at." Miruko stared at him with uneven eyes as if his words only made things more awkward. One can hear the faithlessness in her voice as she responded, "Right." Thankfully, All Might came at that moment, stepping in to say, "Sorry for the intrusion. He's a guest of mine. We came here to see your father." "Oh, the anorexic man. Welcome back. Please stop calling me that." "Yeah, whatever. Hey Pops, you got visitors." Taking a deep breath, All Might turned to his student and told him, "The man we're meeting is called Nezu. You might be a little surprised once you see him, but trust me, he can help you with your situation. He's the principal of UA for a reason." Shocked, Izuku turned to Miruko. "You never told me your dad was the principal of UA. Miruko shrugged her shoulders. "You never asked." "Wait, you two met?" All Might asked. "Yes," the two said in unison. "Who is it, Rumi?" A light orotund voice from inside called out. "Who's Rumi?" Izuku mumbled. "Me," Miruko answered. "Your name is Rumi. How do you not know that?" "It's the only name she goes by." All Might told him. "Don't worry about it, she has a habit of giving out fake names to others." Came the high-pitched voice again. Soon a silhouette of a figure crept out from behind the girl. "Lies," Miruko muttered under her breath. Izuku was prepared to call her out on her comment, but then was stopped dead as the features of the figure behind her became more clear, and the appearance of her father was revealed. His jaw dropped. Luckily he had enough consideration to not say what he was thinking this time. Her dad is a giant mouse. Life will always throw curves at you, whether it's from the world around you or the people you meet. As we continue to learn every day, something will take you by surprise. Sometimes it'll be discovering an interesting fact about how the world works. Other times it's finding out that the girl you've been periodically hanging around with for the last 8 months having a father who isn't even human. You just never know what to expect. The worst part is trying to have a conversation after the fact. While the extremely skinny man talked with the tiny animal in the lavishly decorated living room, the two teens had settled themselves against the wall on the side of the room. Izuku stood straight up with his back aligning with the wall, extensively, making sure that he wasn't scratching or damaging any of the valuables in the room. He didn't want to make a bad first impression as he just entered the house. Miruko, on the other hand, gladly leaned against the wall with her hands behind her back. Her usual fierce red eyes seemed to be traveling around the room, aloof of the current situation, uninterested in anyone or anything currently in the room. The fox boy took multiple glances at the bunny girl next to him, trying to read any visible message she left on her face to see what she was thinking, but got nothing. His curiosity was going through the roof, and who can blame him? Entirely by accident, and a hint of luck did he find out that she was more than he had expected her to be. Suo. The green had uttered in his attempt to break the ice. His heart tightened and his chest felt heavy as he racked his mind for words to say. Suo, replied the vital girl. Her insouciant response was way too casual for someone that had just been caught lying about her identity. He wasn't expecting her to have some massive mental breakdown before laughing maniacally, followed by revealing that she was the main villain and had planned this situation from the very beginning. Nothing like that at all. More wondering what was the point of going through the trouble of lying for so long if having it revealed wasn't such a big deal. I see your dad is I'm adopted, obviously. Oh, thank God. Izuku had to exhale extra strong from the amount of relief he had. I can't even express how happy I am to hear that. You're happy I'm adopted? Miruko responded. She finally decided to look at the fox boy, but her face was slightly scrunched up from his low thought out comment. And no, I didn't mean it like that. I just didn't want to wonder how your current dad managed to. Conveying his point, Izuku gestured to her father, who was just a plain animal, before bringing it back to her fondly shaped body. You know. So you'd rather me experience some circumstance in life that caused me to be separated from my BRTH parents so you didn't have to think about some broad having zoo fever. I mean, why was that the first thing you went to anyways? Seems kinda weird considering we're in a world where quirks can make people turn into mythical beasts like dragons, and heteromorphic users can permanently look like a boss from an adventure video game. What else would I think off of first impressions? There wasn't much to go on. That his quirk made him look like an animal. Better yet, maybe I'm actually some random animal that got the quirk rabbit human girl to look the way I do. That's possible. Yeah, didn't you know that animals can get quirks as well? It's extremely rare to happen and is usually regulated to being rumors and myths. Of course, you see one of the real ones in front of you. He got one that makes him as smart as he is now, Miruko explained. Incredible, Izuku muttered as he stared in amazement at the intelligent creature in front of him. You were kidding about the whole not being human thing, right? Like you are human, where if something took away your quirk you'll still be the way you are. Oh ho, somebody sounds worried. She teased. Her once tense face was now sporting a smug smile. Why, you wanna find out? Doing some scouting, are we? I am just curious is all. You put the idea in my head and now I can't get it out. She went as her complacent attitude spiked to the highest he's seen so far. He didn't know, but she spotted his tail moving anxiously as soon as she brought the idea to light. Regardless, she turned her attention back to the adults that were talking. Izuku followed suit. He needed to aim his focus on the reason he was here in the first place, getting help with his newly awakened animalistic instincts. He didn't have time to waste on whatever he was doing. It was going to be hurt ignoring all the interesting thoughts that were swarming his mind, but he needed to do it, no matter how much his curiosity gets to him. But you were kidding, right? Amusingly rolling her eyes, Miruko told him. Yes, I was. Happy now, fox boy. Izuku didn't reply, but he did take another sigh of relief, and his tail began wagging normally again. And that's why we're here, All Might said after finishing the explanation at an extremely perfect time. I see, Nezu says, looking over at the fox boy before calling out to him. Don't be timid. Come sit over here with us. The subject is about your well-being anyways. I promise I won't bite. Oh, my apologies, Izuku told him, making his way over. It's fine, you two may be the same age, but you don't need to join my daughter in being standoffish to the discussion. He lightly jokes, giving off a few chuckles. Haha, funny, the girl sarcastically replied, mumbling a seething comment afterward. UFC King Rodent. How about some tea as we chat? Nezu offered, not giving him a chance to answer before he began making the brew. I know refreshments and snacks always make me calm. By the way, have you eaten yet? If you haven't, we got some crackers and cookies you can munch on. Though he wasn't much of a tea drinker, Izuku didn't refuse the tea to not feel like a rude guest. I'm fine. I ate before we came here, he said, accepting the cup once the tea was made. Once Nezu finished serving his guest, he settled back down on his chair before continuing the discussion. It's a good thing you came when you did. By the sound of it, the way your rapid growth occurred made you skip over important phases of your development. That's an understatement of what happened, Izuku muttered as he tried his best to look at the man animal person thing he was. Struggling to look at his conversational partner and think of the proper way to address him while keeping his focus, choosing to keep his eyes down at the T. It went from my fox features being so latent that people often mistook what animal they were supposed to be based on, to looking like I've been growing them out for years over a single night. Of course, that's why you have such a lack of control over your body, not just physically but mentally. Mutation quirk users such as yourself need time to adapt to their changing bodies. You've essentially skipped your mutation's adolescence, a destructively deadly occurrence for a young one such as yourself to experience. Destructive. Ain't that a bit excessive? Not really. There's a reason why psychologists usually find the problems or issues a person is facing in the current day to have roots in their childhood. It's the most important stage of the development of a living being. As you know, quirks have many mysteries to them we've yet to discover. So far we've managed to pin down the basic concept to that of genetics. As we build our bodies, we build our genetics as well. Basically that saying of how you make your own bed. Can we skip the science lesson? Miruko loudly interrupted. He's here to get help, not get a lecture. Send a memo or recommend a wiki page or whatever. He can read it later. Just get to the point. A sweat dripped down the face of Nezu from being chastised. Nezu muttered under his breath. I just thought taking the opportunity to educate people as they're listening would do some good. But hey, you don't listen to me and your marks are so great. What was that? Clearing his throat, Nezu continued clearly. Basically, mutation quirks develop with the user like a child. While they're young, they have a parental figure to guide them through the world to get the benefits of it without all the strain, so they can focus on learning it, giving the person time to learn of all its capabilities and how their body triggers them at a reasonable pace while it's still weak. By the time they grow up and their abnormalities have grown to their strongest, they'll already be prepared both mentally and physically for it from their years of progress. You on the other hand skipped that part. Your quirks seem to have lagged behind your body, already causing a disconnection between the two, which would explain why you've had such a difficult time with it growing up. Now it's fully grown and your body is having a strong time dealing with it since it had practically no time or experience to adapt to it. Your quirk went from being a baby that can barely open its eyes to a full-grown man in the blink of an eye, inside the body of a teenager. While Izuku was processing this information, his phone vibrated in his pocket. He took a moment to who it was and discovered he had gotten a text message from All Might. It confused him why he would send a text when they're in the same room. Regardless, without a word he took a quick look. Mr. Number 1, I know this may be a little confusing for you since your condition isn't a quirk, but since we don't have much to go on and to our knowledge, it shares similarities to mutation quirks. It's best we follow it and hope enough things align for you to get help. At least they have the resources to see what does and doesn't work for you. A huge amount of joy filled Izuku's heart. He knew he made a good choice telling his secret to All Might without fear that he'll be too loose-lipped with it. After sending a quick reply back that he understood, Izuku got back to the conversation, still not making eye contact with the person in front of him. Talk about never getting a break. Even when I get a miracle, life still finds a way to turn it against me. Fear not, it's not all doom and gloom. By the sound of it, it's just suppressing and controlling the many instincts and habits that'll emerge. Despite being a late bloomer, it's still a decently ideal time to deal with the predicament, seeing as you're still young and at that age where HRNE are flying everywhere. To us, you'll just be another patient to help. I am. Mr. Yagi brought you here for a reason. We've dealt with many cases similar to your own before. Aside from my job as principal at UA, I do invest in institutions that deal with problems like these constantly. That's why I served you the tea I did. Hearing this made Izuku immediately stop all actions. Did he just get drugged? Ooh. It's a special mix of black tea. You've been having a strong time looking at me. Hopefully it'll clear up any thoughts that have been distracting you. Unless what's bothering you is the kind of animal I was. If so, then you can just refer to me as a mink. Testing out his claim, the boy finally looked up at the mink. What he's been fearing was the sudden occurrence that happens when he looks at someone seemingly weaker than him that he didn't know. He could feel it, his eyes sharpened, teeth ache, nails extended, mouth began producing excessive amounts of saliva than it usually did, and he started seeing the provoking bold blue words floating around the still Nezu. Prey, food, open, pounce. They repeated over and over again endlessly while his symptoms got worse. This was exactly what he wanted to avoid. He didn't know what he might do next. Then he remembered the tea. Could it really help him out? He already was taking periodic sips from it and nothing seemed to have changed. The mink still held a lot of confidence in it, meaning it should have some effect on him. He ultimately decided to trust that confidence and took a large gulp. Wasn't his smartest idea doing that since the tea was still hot, and he promptly let out a blood-curdling scream from his scalding mouth. Watching the boy roll on the ground in pain, Nezu decided now was the time to say, of course it won't work immediately. It needs time for the nutrients to flow throughout your body. Better take your time with that since it's not something you can rush. I wish I'd taken that into consideration beforehand. Izuku groaned, barely able to speak. Insufferable pain filled his mouth, making it strong to move. He hated his new cat tongue. His eye twitched as he still recovered from the pain. Rumi dear, you mind getting him the aid he needs? Nezu called out. Izuku was SCRT out of the room with Miruko to the kitchen, where she went into the fridge and handed him a green popsicle. Here SCK on this, regular ice chips could work as well, but these are my dad's favorite treats, and FCK him, she says him, conveniently getting an orange-colored one for herself. Izuku thanked her but still felt a bit awkward about her reasoning for it, causing him to only loosely hold his own. Watching Miruko enjoy the frozen treat she had acquired, and slurping with such a casual but unintentionally bewitching face, certainly made him stiffen his grip. Eventually noticing the fox boy's zany face, Miruko popped the popsicle out of her mouth before saying, "I swear if you're thinking this is carrot-flavored, I'm kicking your butt 30 times over." And no. The boy blurted out after being caught, quickly turning away to hide his blushing face. What the hell was I thinking? He quickly moved to change the topic. My mind was dwindling on the fact that your dad is the principal of UA. You mean because I've never told you about it before or because he's an animal? Miruko asked. Yes. Well, I'm still surprised that you were a fox. Guess we're both full of surprises. Hey, that's not fair. My own wasn't even completely my fault. I couldn't help that they looked small. I also remember you always referring to them in vague terms because you were too embarrassed to flat out say what they were supposed to be. Honestly, I didn't say anything because I worried it'll crush your spirit if I made a guess. What animal did you take me for anyway? Miruko stayed silent for a moment, her face puckered up as tiny noise leaked out as if she was preventing herself from laughing. Best I don't say. Was it a cat? He persisted. He knew often that a cat was usually the number one guess people had for him. Dread only came when she shook her head, meaning she must have thought he was something much worse than a cat. He hid his face by slamming it against the table so she wouldn't see it be so red. Miruko halted with the teasing for a moment, allowing Izuku time to apply the frosty delight to his searing tongue. Only later did she start back up the conversation. I guess all that training you did really paid off, despite everything. I know you must have freaked out as soon as they appeared. Actually, my mom fainted when she saw me. She did. Huh? No lie, she just dropped. She has a habit of being dramatic about things. She almost died the day I came back from that slime villain's attack all those months ago. PFT, with a mother that faint of heart, I wonder how you're able to pursue a dream of being a hero. Well, I've had help. Oh yeah, her lesbian partner must have helped out. Yeah, she was. They aren't a couple. They're not even lesbians. You know they can hear you. Miruko told him with a smile, seeking her head toward the room they'd previously left, causing Izuku to cover his embarrassment again, and lowering his voice. They're just longtime good friends. I'll love to see how good they are, but whatever. She was sure to use the quotation sign with her hands as she said this word. Believe it. Regardless, it's a good thing she was there for you. Auntie Bakugo helped cool my mom's nerves when she worried too much, or at least will do her best to stop her from being too restricting because of it. That didn't mean my mom discouraged me, she just didn't do much to support me. At all. In terms of my dream, I mean. She is warming up to the idea more now since my tail grew out. Oh, so she's allowing you to take the entrance exam. Well, she didn't say I can't take it. I have 4-ish years to convince her. I just got to build myself up enough so she feels confident enough to let me go. I got a plan. I call it hampering. It's not hampering, just delaying till I'm in a proper position to maximize my chance of getting a yes. Hey, you got a good chance anyways. Knowing my dad, whenever he and Mr. Yagi get together like this, it's usually to get some kid into a program. What kind of program? Izuku asked. He usually doesn't hear much about All Might's activity outside of his standard but amazing hero duty and fame. A training program, of course, Miruko answered, to help teens improve their quirks so they have a better chance to pass the entrance exams for hero schools all around. Could mean I wasn't All Might's first candidate. Most of these training programs I've heard are basically government-regulated martial dojos, but for quirks. While open to everyone, a lot of them have a harsh acceptance rate since they only want people who have the potential of being a hero. Finding people he wants as a good successor can't be easy for him, so scouting potential people through those training programs won't be a bad idea. Izuku thought, you think they're going to enroll me in one? In your case, it'll probably be one my dad is more involved in. He usually saves his facility for cases like yours where people have trouble controlling their quirks regardless of if they're planning on becoming a hero or not. Preparing you for the test will be no problem either. He's pretty okay at it. He trained me after all. You mean if I join the training program he's involved in I can be like you? PFT, no. First off, there's only ever going to be one of me. Second, my training with my dad is completely different than those training programs. I can kick a person's butt 30 times before he hits the floor. The government doesn't want to encourage an image of teens using their quirks against others, so these programs are structured to help the person hone their quirks abilities than actually fighting people. Oh, wait, so does that mean you physically fight your dad or? Why no. You've seen him, you think he ever threw a punch in his life? I was just making sure. You gave me something to think about. Don't think too strong. Trust me, you'll do just fine in a program. Despite the encouragement, Izuku's mind seemed to wander elsewhere as he mutters, yeah, just fine. After the pair finished their business in the kitchen, they returned to the lounge, meeting back up with the adults in the room. You're back, Nezu announces once seeing them, so tell me, how do you see me now? Another look at the white mink gave Izuku his answer. The words still hovered over Nezu, they didn't appear. They were more transparent and evoked his body less. It was easier to ignore what they were telling him to do. I'm seeing you a lot clearer, Izuku told him. Then the treatment works, perfect, cheered the furry creature. Now, Mr. Yagi has to tell you. Actually, I wanted to ask something first, Izuku interrupted, approaching the two adults. What is it? All Might had asked. Internally he prayed it had nothing to do with the conversation that happened in the kitchen. He's helped many people of all kinds of backgrounds before, but he didn't want to get involved with whatever this deal was with his possibly lesbian mom. Sounded too complicated for him to have any input. Before he spoke, Izuku took a deep breath. He knew the options and opportunities that were being offered to him, yet they didn't truly feel satisfying, just filling. Maybe if this were before that day all those months ago he would have easily accepted it just to get to the next day with a quick fix, but that kind of thinking no longer matched his resolve. He needed to strive for what he wanted, not wait for it. With the room's attention on him, he announced his resolution. I want to personally train under you, Mr. Nezu, for the hero course entrance exam. Okay, Nezu answered calmly, sipping his tea. That easily? Izuku shouted, flabbergasted to how quick his request was accepted. You're not even going to object a little to it? I kinda had an entire retort speech planned out and everything. The fluffy round fingers of the mink waved in the air as he replied, there's no need. I already overheard you two in the kitchen. You see, Izuku, I'm trying to change how society grows its heroes so we can flourish a generation of better quality heroes both physically and mentally to assure our safety and continuation as a society. So of course I'm always looking for people with a special kind of mindset that's different from your average person, and encourage them to join a hero course. Believe it or not, you're the first person besides my daughter who has asked specifically me to train them and not just recommend them to a training program. Though I guess you've had the advantage of knowing my daughter's capabilities with all the trouble she gets into. Either way, you sought out help from me even though I don't look like the most capable person for the job because you know I can personally help you way more than any program. You're clearly striving to be the best you can. Not knowing what else to say, Izuku just went, oh. I wanted to suggest it, All Might muttered under his breath, feeling down from having his already small spotlight swiped from him a second time in this story. Prepare your SHT, you're moving in with us, Miruko told him. I'm doing what now? Izuku stated out loud. You're doing what now? Was how the Baku family reacted in unison when Izuku told them after finally returning home. I got accepted into a preparatory quirk training program that helps mutation, more especially animal. Quirk users like me get used to their new bodies, Izuku explained to them. They suggest that I live in with them to help boost the efficiency of my progress, and because they already have the proper equipment needed to tend to my special needs. We heard it just sounded too good to be true, Mitsuki says. You've only grown out your quirk less than a week ago yet somehow got accepted into any kind of those programs so quickly. Not to mention they're giving you a free dormitory pass including food and other essentials. You sure this isn't some scam and we're going to be paying some Russian mafia ransom money for you? I gave my mom the owner's number. She's talking to him right now upstairs. He's a person with a record of being involved with this stuff. Mitsuki went as her suspicions weren't quite satisfied yet. Her motherly institution was telling her something was off about this, but she wasn't sure what. You sure this is something you need? That was when Masaru spoke up. If we're being honest, he's been having trouble with his quirk since childhood, so maybe this could be good for him. Also, he already tore through 215,236.18 yen worth of stuff, so this'll save us a fortune. And save me some tears. That last comment earned him a very stern look from his wife. Smart as always, he knew his best options with as little trouble as possible would be to leave. He already said his input, raising his hands and walking away while muttering under his breath, there's only so many times I can buy a new mattress. We still haven't finished paying off that TV either. Anyways, Mitsuki says, turning back to Izuku, I guess it's fine if Inko is okay with it. She'll probably quadruple background check this guy to make sure he's legitimate. I'm just going to miss having you around. I'm not bound to be there forever. I can come back and sleep over anytime I want. I promise I'll come visit, Izuku assured her. Please do, it's too soon for me to lose your fluffiness. Without you I'll only be left home with that troublesome bundle of rage and discourtesy I call a son, she heartlessly exclaimed. Boy, I'm still in the room, Katsuki shouted at his mother. Instead of responding, Mitsuki embraced Izuku in a tight hug filled with sentiment, one the boy secretly enjoyed a lot more than he let on. Don't ignore me, the blonde continued to yell. It took a while before Izuku managed to slip through the woman's grip so he could start packing. He sighed, relieved that they were believing the story. That made things a lot easier. If push had come to shove, he might have had to take more drastic measures to convince them, even if that meant a sudden leave of absence. He truly loved his family and wished them all well. He just needed to do this. His longing goes beyond just wanting to be a great hero or being All Might's successor. He wanted to improve himself. For that to happen, he needs to make a few changes in his life. This wasn't just for him but for the important people in his life. Oh, Izuku, his mother called out. She had just exited her room right as the boy passed by it. He wanted to improve for her. Stopping dead in his tracks, Izuku looked back. Did you finish your phone call? The older woman's eyes dragged from the ground before meeting his. Yes, I just got off the phone with him. He sounds like a really interesting man and talked so formally. Well, he's more of an animal than a man, Izuku instinctually corrected. What? Nothing, I was just mumbling some mumbo-jumbo, he quickly lied. He doesn't know how much was going to be said on the phone call because he forgot to ask back when they first made the plan and didn't want to accidentally extinguish or delay the approval by adding in unnecessary information. Oh, well anyways we talked for a bit, discussed a few things, and I was able to look up the facilities he worked at. He seemed to know his stuff. You sure you want to do this? Yes I do, this place can give me exactly the training I need to take the hero entrance exam for the hero course of a school. Her voice remained calm but her words were what struck him, the small amount of dread he felt about the situation displayed on his face. Did she see through the facade? Was she trying to test him? Or did Nezu decide to tell her everything? It was a bit obvious, she states, her voice sounded almost patronizing, that he would think she wouldn't consider this an option. You were able to plan all this in such a minuscule amount of time without talking to us about it first. There's no way you would have done it if it didn't involve being a hero. It was Izuku's turn for his eyes to be staring at the floor, his guilt for lying catching up with him. He rubbed his neck awkwardly. Of all the people in his household he didn't want to argue on this was her. Yet he knew from the start she'll be the hardest to convince. She is the only person there that knows the truth about his quirk. Which is why he wanted to convince the Bakugos first. With enough luck Mitsuki would be able to butter and co enough for the idea by pointing out the benefits it can have on him. Trying to explain himself he said, Mom I know you'll do it because you're passionate about it, and Co interrupted, you're such a reserved boy. I take partial responsibility for it as a parent for not pushing you more to explore. Despite that, whenever I see you in something you're passionate about, well, we both know how reckless you can be, like that one time I took you out shopping and you ran into the streets because you thought you saw All Might. It wasn't my fault. Why was someone cosplaying when October was a month away? Point is, you're willing to do anything when you love something. Even if that meant trying to be a hero without a quirk, despite all your disadvantages. I don't know if you always had that mindset or your recent growth spurt gave you newfound confidence. I'll just pray that whatever your father gave you will protect you. I know this sounds a bit abundant to say, but be safe out there. Hearing those words come out of his mother's mouth riveted his soul. Not only did he get the permission he wanted, but genuine encouragement he hadn't felt from her in years. With a smile appearing on his face, Izuku looked back up to face his mother before making a promise to her. I'll do my best training and work strong to make sure nothing happens to me to make you worry. When I return you'll see just how much of a hero I can become. The two embraced in a hug. With uncertainties and secrets still plagued both their conscience, they were able to set it aside for neutral trust. I have to work strong for her. Later, as Izuku was packing his things, he was almost finished when he realized there was one more thing he needed to settle. So dork, you managed to get in some training program huh? Said Katsuki, who was leaning on the doorway watching him. Yep, Izuku responded, keeping his focus on his task. Weird they accepted you since you got almost no control over your quirk. I was just lucky they thought my quirk had the potential to grow. You're a fox, how much can you grow? I don't know, guess that's why they want to find out. That's an unreasonably dumb mindset they have. It is, but it's benefiting me and I'm taking it. I've heard those training programs have all their kids trained together. You know you're going to be among a bunch of people who had more robust and groomed quirk than yours. I know, I think that's sort of the point. Whatever, I guess you're used to feeling outmatched so you probably wouldn't mind it. Wouldn't be surprised if on day one they won't make it a habit of taking your lunch rations or whatever. I'll be fine. Honestly, most of those programs are a waste anyways. I heard they don't even teach any person-on-person combat. What a joke. We're trying to become heroes, we need to learn how to kick a villain's butt. Ha, am I right? Wait, well or knowing you're dumb but you're still going to try to wiggle your way into the hero course and the only way in is the entrance exam. You know if you want, instead of wasting your time on some half-baked program, you can just train with me. Why? The sudden change in his voice surprised even Katsuki. You know, so I can. So you can keep me close to continue shitting on me. Izuku interrupted, or insult me, or shout at, or to have someone you can constantly put down. Izuku, I'm trying to better myself so I can train to become a hero and not be berated whenever I breathe. Why would I ever want to train with you? He states, picking up the bag he just finished packing. As he headed out the door, no more words were exchanged between the two boys. Changing something, whether it's fate or a situation, can't always be done by keeping everything the same. When you make changes to yourself and your decisions, your life can change. Sometimes it can happen in good ways, other times bad, and others it'll be in a way where you aren't sure how to take it. Regardless, people must always make changes to their life for the better as time moves on. Nothing is ever stagnant for long. A lesson many young people should learn before it's too late, as both caution and hope. Life will always change and you can't be the same person forever. Which is just fine, because Izuku Midoriya never wants to be the same as he once was again. He was prepared to face the new world, as the step toward the familiar estate. For most people, their morning starts with waking up to the sunshine. For Izuku Midoriya, his morning started with a dream. Emerging from the lake, the boy gasped for air as he paddled his way to land. As soon as he secured himself, he frantically looked at his surroundings, trying to understand what was going on after suddenly waking up underwater. He recognizes the well-kept garden, forest of bamboo he was lost in for literal months, and most important, the Sankei house. It was all coming back to him. He knew where he was. Yes, I'm back in that dream again. Izuku cheered in excitement. He's been waiting for this to happen ever since his last visit, when it was cut short by that masked fellow. The masked fellow who he just remembered threw him into the lake in the first place. He's gonna remember that next time they meet. He just got finished distancing himself from one person who FCKS with him a lot, and will not be dealing with that again so soon. Crawling out of the water, he did his best to wring his soaked clothes as dry as he could get it. I'm so lucky I can pick up right where I left off in these things, Izuku stated, thankful about that advantage, or else he might have drowned. Wait, can I die here? It is a dream after all. If I do die here, what'll happen? I hope it's not one of those you die here, you die in real life situations. Considering all the things this place put me through, I won't last long. If he wanted answers for anything, there was only one place he knew of where he could get them. Approaching the house, Izuku paused at the door again, remembering his last encounter here. Last time, it didn't seem as though the masked man wanted him to hear the conversation he had with that other person. He wasn't sure if they were still talking, but to be safe it'll be better to not make his presence known. At least, that was the plan. Before he even had a chance to touch the door handle, the entire door was flung open, and once again he came face to face with the masked man. Like last time, he had his fox-like mask with blue markings and a green kimono on, but his eyes couldn't be seen, and the tail he had when he first saw him was gone. I knew you were back, he exclaimed, grabbing the teen by his shirt and picking him up. Izuku didn't have time to resist, only managing to shout out the question. How? All the noise you made coming out of the water, why did you think I sent you there in the first place? The man states, stepping a bit outside facing the lake. Still too soon for us to properly talk. Sorry, kiddo. You're going to throw me into the lake again. No, last time I pushed you into it, this time I'm tossing. It's a subtle difference. Oh, come on, please. You have no idea how long I'm going to have to wait till I can come back here. If you want something to blame for that, blame your lack of control over your powers. Now away with you, states the masked man about to throw Izuku. Stop, called out a voice, making the man stop in his tracks. Suddenly Izuku felt his body being snatched out of the masked man's grip. Judging from the context, it was this other voice that was his savior. Was it the same shining albino who saved him? Couldn't be, for one, he didn't even notice one brim of light coming from the house, or even when whoever came to save him. The voice was more tender as well, and unlike the shining albino, this one spoke with a lot more vigor in their voice. Izuku's savior embraced him with a hug before stating, "Don't treat a child in such a harsh way. For a guide, you sure treat your clients with little respect." The teen couldn't help feeling safe in his current position. This person just had a presence that would make anyone feel protected from any danger, while also relaxing them with a warm aura from their soft embrace. If his dreams could feel like this all the time, then he would never want to leave. He'll just stay there till the end of time. Or at least until he awakens, which would be quickly followed with an ocean of disappointment. The audible sound of teeth grinding against one another could be heard from behind the masked man's mask. He declared, "I told you not to call me that, woman." Wait, did he just say woman? Izuku thought as soon as he heard him, not sure if he heard him correctly. "And I thought I told you, my name is Nana." The woman replied. Izuku felt her grip tighten from her annoyance with not being called the right name. Nana. The boy repeated the name in his head. Despite hearing an interesting bit of information, his mind was elsewhere. Nana is usually a girl's name. Then does this mean I'm distancing himself from the woman that calls herself Nana? He took the small space he had to get a glimpse of the woman. Her raven hair was kept in a well-maintained bun except for the bangs she left above her forehead, and the only thing she was wearing was a sleeveless black bodysuit. She felt the boy inching away from her, looking down and giving him a bright smile when she saw his face to assure him that he was with an ally. Despite the warm greeting, Izuku wasn't paying attention to that either. Something else was more pressing on his mind. It's what kept his eyesight so low that he didn't notice the small mole Nana had under her lip. Nana's high-collar bodysuit was partially zipped down, revealing the milky white skin of her chest, which would mean when she pulled Izuku into a hug, that soft fuzziness he was basking in was from being pressed against her. Bebubs. He didn't know what was wrong with him. Why was he so distracted by a woman's breasts? Before, this kind of thing only happened with Mitsuki, and that was during the rare occasions where he accidentally got an extensive look at her poised body. Usually during the early morning on days she doesn't have work, or during the late nights of the ones she does. Her clothes will be worn a bit more loosely than usual in her exhausted state, sometimes leaving the opportunity for a curious youth to get completely non-on-purpose glimpses of her cleavage and other admirable features. Opportunities that had a sharp spike of appearances that Izuku stumbled onto. It wasn't his fault that sometimes Mitsuki will forget that there's a horny teenager growing adolescent boy that's not her son in the house, and won't close the door, making it a lot easier for the boy to accidentally walk in on her when she's changing, or whatever else she might do that might interest a teen whenever he comes in to get some bandages for his hand for training or ask her a question. It was his fault that he never fully learned his lesson about always knocking before you enter a room. Not that there was any incentive to not be a recidivist, he never suffered one bit from it. You can easily say my name, right, little one? The appealing black-haired woman asked him, petting his head. Nana ain't a strong name to remember, especially for someone who seems to take a liking to literature. You speak so highly, yet ignorant to yourself. What a complete beach. The boy wasn't paying attention because he's too distracted engulfing himself with the company of your immense cest, the masked man pointed out. I guess that makes two of you. Ah hey, you're the one who started taking off your clothes not long after you appeared. It was stuffy in there. I don't think I'll need my hero costume on here anyway, and I'm not going to wear those gloves and boots for no reason. Try wearing those things for hours straight and see how sweaty they'll get. Whatever, Inbeta. Stop calling me that. I'm a guest here, not an invader. An Inbeta will continue to be called an Inbeta as long as they keep doing Inbeta things. Izuku cut into the conversation. I'm so confused right now. This is why I want you to wait till after I handle everything before speaking, the masked man stated, reaching for the boy again to complete his earlier intention. Nana was quick enough to pull the boy away before telling the man, no, come now. You already threw him into the water once, he's not going to spend another month floating like a corpse. I would know. Izuku interjected again, but I didn't drown. Yeah, it was a bit uncomfortable seeing your unmoving body drift around, sinking and popping back up once in a while, but he assured us you were fine and will be back up in a month's time. Nana explained, I personally didn't take his word for it at first, but I had to concede since we weren't able to put up a resistance at the time. Seeing you safe at least tells me he doesn't want you dead. The masked man scoffed at her words, replying, of course I wasn't going to do anything that'll kill him, that'll be performing seppuku. Now that you see I have good intentions, let me take care of him so I can get back to business. What is with you and wanting to throw children in lakes? Nana exclaimed, holding Izuku tight to her, which he had no objection to. I just want to know what's going on here. Izuku manages to stammer out. He wants to defend for himself as well. How am I still alive after being in water for a month? Wait a bit, they just acknowledged that time went by in a dream, while I wasn't in the dream. Has that been happening the whole time? Does time even stop moving here? Do they even know this is just a dream to me? Is this just a dream? Because there's already a lot that needs to be said, but with you guys coming in here made it more complicated. I need time to make sure you're a non-threat, compile everything he needs to know together, and get things arranged for later, the masked man explained, with the annoyance of a worker being told how to do his job by the customer. You can do that later, we have an entire month to discuss whatever you want, and the boy can only come here for a single night. He can't stay here forever, right? Questioned Nana. No, the man answered. Oh my god, they know this is a dream. It's a dream that acknowledges that it's a dream and found a way to exist outside of dreaming. A runaway dream. I hope they don't stage a revolt and somehow take over. Then allow the boy to have his monthly day of grace. He's curious about all of this, and forcibly kicking him out every time is only going to make it worse. Just tell him some basic things and allow him to roam the area a bit to get used to it so he has something else to do than listen in on us. Nana suggested. She had her own curiosity about the situation and maybe this kid can help open up some things this person was hiding. Things always leak when a party clashes against itself. Hopefully what gets said will show if they have any devious intent. Anything that restricts one for all on this level like he did in such a short amount of time needs to be looked into. The masked man looked between Izuku and Nana for a moment before he grunted. Fine, get in. I'll get you a change of clothes as well, he tells them, making his way toward the house. Nana kept her guard up the entire time he walked past them. When they entered the house, it was exactly how Izuku had expected it to be. It had a similar design to the house he visited back at that festival. It had a very traditional style to it, but unlike the one he visited, it had a bunch of modern luxurious that he didn't expect to see. Things such as light bulbs, a working toilet, refrigerator, and he were pretty sure he saw the shape of a box TV. He wasn't going to attempt understanding if this is the work of electricity or dream magic bullshit. He went with the masked man in a room away from Nana, who compromised to secretly stand by the doorway in case any interesting conversations occurred when they thought she wasn't there. What color do you want? The man asked Izuku once they were alone and the teen put aside his wet clothes. What? Izuku replied, not sure what he meant as he gave no context on what he specifically meant. The color kimono you want. What else would I give you? Oh, sorry. I guess, green. TCH, talk about unoriginal. Alright, fine, here. When the man first said that, he expected there to be a fresh pair neatly folded in front of him. Instead, the man began grabbing at his robe and began slipping it off. Oh, what are you doing? Izuku asked. He was visibly concerned. Within a second the masked man had pulled off his robe with one hand and swung it around like it was a magician's cape. The cloth spread out looked like a huge curtain had surrounded the man. The more it was spun around, the larger in scale did it appear to have become until it became a spiraling spherical that took up a half the room. The entire time the man's hand moved in a swift motion, perfectly wielding the fabric with great finesse by showing how he can willfully change the shape and speed of the. It was one of the most amazing displays of control the boy had ever seen up close before. He wouldn't mind learning this kind of skill as a party trick. Then he remembered that he has no friends to show this trick to, excluding Rumi, but knowing her she might find it to be a bit too arena to find enjoyable. Hearing the objects inside the room clatter because of the rushing wind the masked man was creating, Nana broke her self-agreement to only listen from the doorway, and opened the door by a pinch to gander a peek into the room. Though she had little knowledge about the start of this performance, she had enough context to get the situation. It wouldn't take much to piece together what came before. Suddenly a voice boomed from the center of the sphere, Henken Jujutsu. Stunned from the voice alone, Izuku didn't think of moving out the way when the masked man began to move toward him. With a stomp, he commanded the entire array of clothing to flow into a single direction, following the wind turbulence his hand left behind. With a swing similar to a speed pitch, the wave of fabric flowed through the air before crashing into the teen Dorsu. It took a moment for Izuku to realize what happened. He looked down to see that the kimono the masked man wore was put on him. Except, it wasn't the same kimono the man had on. The past wearer had over an entire foot on him in height, and even under his clothes, Izuku could tell the man had more bulk than him. That's why it's strange it fitted him perfectly, a single kimono being able to fit the two different body types of a man and a teenager the same way was impossible. Even if this was a dream, there had to be a limit. The design of the kimono was even changed, being made to look more stylish with a few splashes of golden-colored sketches. Through the use of a nearby mirror, he saw on the back of his new outfit was the three-claw mark symbol that the masked man had on his own. "What did you do?" Izuku asked. This had to be magic. This was a dream after all. Anything can technically exist here even if it doesn't exist in reality. "I dressed you, of course," the masked man answered. "What else did you think I did?" "And no, I meant. Seriously, you had a front row seat watching me. Why do you have so many questions?" "Because so many things are happening without explanation, and the more I find out, the more interested I am, but also a bit concerned." Walking over to the window, the masked man sighed. "This is why I would prefer doing things my way. That way I could tell you everything as it is at once." Sadly, because of the Inbeta, One for All was the name right. Everything here is mostly screwed up and the landscape has changed to something new. I need to understand it as well before I'm able to explain it, which I'm taking seriously with the proper amount of time I feel is needed. It may seem fine now because you've only ever seen the base of this world, but when we eventually go outside you'll see what I mean. And this was after I stopped it early. The entire time he was speaking, he had opened the window and plucked out a few leaves from a tree branch nearby before closing it. During this time Izuku noticed something was missing. While the masked man still had that scarf wrapped around his head that hid his hair, his tail was gone. The black tail that he saw when he first arrived here was nowhere to be seen. He knew that after the initial glance at him the tail recited itself into his robes, but he assumed that was just him hiding it, not making it disappear like a trick. Unless he was hiding it under his fundoshi, which is something he'll never think about checking. The tail has completely disappeared. Izuku was going to ask about it, but then suddenly Nana completely opened the door she was hiding behind to say something. "That's a neat trick you got there. I knew tons of ladies that would kill to be able to dress themselves up like that. You mind doing the same for me? I think a kimono would fit the environment here better anyways. Plus they look quite stylish compared to everything else we have to wear here. Not that there's a problem with walking around in a loincloth." Taunted Nana. She did love the designs they had, but her main goal was seeing that technique again from the beginning up close. "I just need to egg him on enough to do it again. This should give me a hint to how his powers work. I just prefer something that'll cover enough without looking and being so well compacted." To be demanding is to be annoyingly consistent with requests, the masked man mumbled to himself before walking toward her. "Choose a color." "Well, if you're being so generous, I'll take something. Yellow with flowers on it. Don't be afraid to spiff up the design a little. I'm not that old." "Is that too much to ask?" "Not at all." Nana watched him closely, waiting to see what he does first. When he walks by she decides to give one more taunt to make him lose focus, saying, "That's a surprise to hear. After being so begrudging with everything, I'm surprised there isn't an issue with this request." When she turned around to continue tracking his movement, she was shocked to see that the man was fully clothed in a new black and white kimono. Stunned, Nana went to ask when did he. She instantly dropped when she realized two more things. The first was that she was placed in a yellow kimono like she specially requested, and the second was that her BR was gone. "Dorsu." The words rang out as the man continued to walk away. His hands were held above his head in a fluorescent motion. In one he was holding the stolen clothes of Nana up in the air. "Why would I have trouble doing something as easy as flipping the page of a book?" He Kylie replied to Nana's earlier remark. She didn't answer back as she was still stunned from the event to care about the petty conversation. She only had her eyes off of him for a second, maybe even less than that, and yet he was able to simultaneously change both of their outfits. The feeling was shared by Izuku as well. He was watching the entire confrontation from not that far away, and even he doesn't know what happened. He blinked and it was over. "You didn't need that whole flashy spin display." That was the question Izuku had to ask, even though the answer was obvious. The masked man stopped in his tracks and turned around, telling him, "Nope, doing all of that wasn't necessary. That'll be way too annoying to do every time I want a change of clothes." "Then why did you do it the first time?" "I don't get company here. I just wanted an audience to show off to once in a while." It really was just a party trick after all. To be entertained is to discover new things, which breaks present norms, he continued, spouting another haiku. I never expected you to be one who wears lingerie under a hero costume. Hanging off the man's pinky was a black BR that looked too thin to be effective for combat. Seeing this made the once collective Nana blush. A long-time secret of hers was outed. Hey. Don't worry, the BR was the only undergarment I took. Didn't want you to feel too compacted, but by the looks of it, you were already hanging loose for a while. They just feel better, so give me back my BR. When things calmed down, the trio had seated themselves back in the living room, but the mood was different from how Izuku envisioned it. He expected it to be a tense standoff between him and the woman that called herself Nana against the masked man. Instead, it's him still being baffled from everything that had occurred. Nana seemed more furred than her previously calm state, and the masked man. He stayed the same, but it became obvious that he's not all strict and rules. The masked man started the conversation. I'll allow you to ask 3 questions. Make them count till next time you're here. 3 questions. Nana thought to herself, giving him only 3 questions is equivalent to giving a dying man in the desert a bottle cap filled with water. It's going to be impossible for him to indulge himself to satisfy his curiosity, much less even know what to ask first. The older woman sought to help out the boy, thinking of the perfect combination of 3 questions to get as much information as they can. The masked man obviously won't answer any questions, seeing as he still wants to hide knowledge of this world from them. They had to be discreet enough to bypass his threshold of willing to answer but complicated to get a detailed response. What's your name? That was the first question Izuku asked. Was Nana's reaction. Shinwa Lai, or Lai for short, Lai calmly answered. Izuku replied to his introduction with his own. Nice to meet you, I'm Izuku Midoriya. Who are you, or more specifically, what are you? I can't fully answer that. That's fine, just answer as much as you want to. I remember there was something mentioned about being a guide. Hold on, Nana tried to interject once again. Why is he just tossing away questions like this? The first one was completely trivial, while the second one is too upfront. Of course, it'll get denied. I'm not a guide, Lai responded, talking over Nana's comment as she wasn't the one allowed to ask questions. I am a guardian, your guardian, whose purpose is to guide you through this world. For his final question, Izuku said, and what is this world? Actually no, what is this place called? Nana had to ask, are you serious? Lai was surprised that this was how the boy was going to use his question, but it's not his place to complain, he told him. I have no idea what this world is officially called. I'll just refer to it as your desired realm for the edification of abilities manifested. Or the dream world. That's awfully convenient, at least I know what to call this place now, Izuku replied, getting up to leave. I guess I'm out of questions now. I'll be leaving then, Lai. Take care. Speechless, the raven-haired woman just looked back and forth between the two, wondering if she just witnessed the greatest throw of the opportunity in her life. Or afterlife. She wants to be mad, but she can't get angry at a child for making bad questions. She wants to investigate on her own, but Lai's presence is preventing her from getting anything outside of what he wants her to know. For the time being, she has to accept it. The only compromising thought she had was the slight assurance that no evil influence is involved here. The boy's innocent presence and Lai's alleged role of being an honest guardian who has good intentions, but are just a jerk about it. They seem to be decent people to be chosen as a one-for-all successor. If you have a minute, Lai called out before Izuku reached the door. He rose from his seat to walk with Izuku. I wanted to know why you would ask such simple questions. I know the rules of what would be answered made what could be asked as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack, but it seemed too easily accepted. Izuku smiled as he replied to him. I was thinking about what to ask you the second you said you would tell me some basic things. By the time we got to the room, I already had 100 questions I could ask. I wanted to get answers for all of them, but then I saw how you spoke about dealing with one-for-all's inclusion in all of this and realized that regardless, I'm going to find out what I want to know eventually. Once they stepped outside of the house, Izuku looked up to the clouds in the sky and still broken moon before continuing. Either from you or my own discoveries. No need to bombard someone who, like me, had a sudden rush of new changes to their lives and is trying to figure them all out. You're fine with only having so little information? Lai inquired. Izuku nodded. For now, typically speaking, whatever this place can give me, if there's something here for me, I can wait a while for it. I've got my own things to work on for myself, and this isn't something I'm going to rely on for anything. We got a lot of time to get ourselves together. A snicker came from behind Lai's mask as he said, I guess you're right. I'm going to take my sweet time talking to the fair maiden. Fair maiden. That's an awfully nice thing to say about her coming from you. I thought you disliked her. Lai looked behind him to make sure Nana wasn't trying to listen in again before whispering to Izuku. I dislike the concept of one for all being an inbeta as I should for my role of a guardian. I will keep up the act in front of them so they know they can't take things here for granted. Outside of that, it's not wrong to admire their company as long as I keep to my duties. No. To add to Izuku's confusion, Lai broke out into another haiku with an interesting subject. Wish me all the luck, to complete my longing, and rest on her wreck. After getting a long stare from Izuku, Lai felt like he was being judged by the teen and reminded him of his moment with the woman's bosom that he in no shape or form tried to resist against. Quickly trying to change subject, Izuku asked. Anyways, I want to wake up or at least have this dream end for me. How can I do that? No words were exchanged, but Izuku knew he had misspoken. He swears he saw the mouth of the fox mask lie head-on curl into a smile. Just following your requests. No wait, don't. Goodbye, kiddo. In the seconds leading up to hitting the water after being flung, Izuku had enough time to think about something he noticed. It was about Lai. He has a good heart, no doubt, and works strong for his goals. But he's also lonely, obsessed with bubs, and despite being a strong worker, is pretty terrible at his job at the moment with only a few golden moments. Relatable, yet that doesn't excuse the most important thing. He's pretty immature for a guardian. Splash. Izuku gasped as he shot up from his bed. Unfortunately, when that happened, Rumi was already in the room and had a front row seat of seeing the body randomly wake up as if he was being attacked. She was only in a white t-shirt that covered all the way down to her thighs. It displayed the words, "If life pushes you down, don't be a beach and go kick its butt." One can tell her surprise with how wide her eyes were when she stopped in her tracks. She wasn't fearful of anything, more of a mixture of confusion and awkwardness. That last part defines Izuku's emotions after seeing her in his room as well, except to replace confusion with embarrassment. They stayed dead silent for a minute. Rumi seized him up to make sure he wasn't going to do something else unexpected, and Izuku was trying his best to act as nothing happened. "Do you always wake up like this?" Rumi had asked him, gesturing a finger over his body to signify that she meant his prior actions that looked like he had a spasm. Would you believe me if I said no? Izuku answered, giving his own inquiry. Rumi shrugged, stating, "I have no reason not to." Then, "No, I just had a weird dream." What kind of dream could have caused? Well, that. By the way, you should warn my dad about that before he sees it for himself and assumes you're possessed. He's very paranoid about that stuff and trusts me, he will exorcise you. Good ... to know. And this dream is kinda crazy to explain. Rumi walked over to the edge of his bed and sat down to help take off the tape he put around his hands so he wouldn't claw through the sheets. Crossing her legs to get comfortable, she said, "Well, I'm now invested, so try me." Okay, I'm going to need to give a bit of context because it's kinda like a long-running dream. Oh, those are rare. Now I am actually interested. Okay, you see, it starts with me being trapped. It started with you already being trapped. Yes, on the moon. On the moon. Like on some sort of secret sci-fi base. No, the literal moon was like a birdcage. I couldn't see or anything. Oh, then how did you get out? A rabbit just happened to be P&D something on top of it and broke me free. A rabbit? Yes. On the moon? Yes. Broke you free? Yeah. A random rabbit got on the moon and threw P&D it with its tiny FC King paws. Or legs, or whatever it has, broke the moon in half. I know, well, I actually didn't get a chance to see the size of the rabbit, but I guess that doesn't matter. Honestly, I don't get it either. And then what happens? I fall down to earth. All the way from the moon. Yes, and ended up in a swamp covered by a forest of bamboo that was so dense I couldn't see an exit even if I climbed upon them. After waking from blacking out, assumingly from the fall, I then got lost in there for the betterment of like 6 months worth of time. Luckily, a rainbow light shined one day to lead me out of there and I found one of those old Japanese-type homes that only the rich can afford. It was at this point, the look of interest and wonder that was on Rumi's face had disappeared to be replaced with disbelief and confusion as the story continued to get more ridiculous. Yet, she just couldn't stop listening. It was so bizarre she wanted to know what kind of insane ending it would come to. She continued to egg him on with telling the story. Go on. So I go to the house and there's this guy with a fox mask that had a black tail who was talking to an albino person that was glowing that rainbow light from earlier. Except for the fox mask guy. His name is Lai, by the way, or Shin will Lai, but he says calling him Lai was fine. He had a black tail at first, but then suddenly later he just didn't have any more. I know because I saw him nearly naked after he got me a change of clothes. Wait, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, sorry. I needed to get a change of clothes because Lai decided he didn't want me to listen in on his conversation. So he pushed me into a lake and my body was apparently left there for an entire month floating like a corpse. So when I woke up again, I went back to the house to try again. Instead of the shining albino man being there, it was this raven-haired girl dressed like a hero. This was weird because everything else in that world seemed to be more traditional Japan stuff, except the moon is broken in half and the rabbit is probably still there. Anyways, Lai tried to throw me back into the lake, but this new woman named Nana saved me, and then the two argued over whether or not I should be tossed into the lake again. Lai finally considered and let us inside. That was when he took me into another room and threw his kimono onto me, which somehow changed its shape, size, and even design to fit me perfectly. That was when he went on a rant about how strong his job was right now because Nana and her company screwed everything up. Then Nana came into the room and demanded to get a kimono as well. Rumi's silence kinda hinted to Izuku that he was losing her completely. Her face had turned from "man, this story is strange, I wonder where it is going" quickly to "oh my god, what goes on in his head." The perplexed stare she was giving him said all that was needed. He even felt it stupid saying his dream out loud and regretted mentioning it. So ... he walked by her in ... I in a fraction of a second ... dressed ... both of them. He coughed awkwardly before saying, "Yeah, it's a really stupid dream where things got out of control quickly. This is why some people prefer keeping their dreams to themselves." The absurdity of it was so high that Rumi got on her knees to shift close to him just to check his temperature, placing a hand on his forehead and checking to see how warm he was. "Oh, why are you checking my temperature? I'm making sure you didn't have a fever dream, 'cause it's looking like you had a fever dream. Now hold still." It was a bit strong for him to be still, as Rumi was focused on making sure Izuku didn't trip last night. She didn't pay attention to how close she was getting. While her chest wasn't right up to his face, they were close enough to completely occupy Izuku's vision. A pair of dark-skinned titties being presented to him. That t-shirt did not do any favors in hiding her features. What a way to start the morning. Of course, Izuku couldn't stay there for long, not with his new body. He had to physically hold down his tail when it started to wag so she wouldn't notice. "I am fine, it was just a dream." "I know, doesn't mean we shouldn't check. You just moved into a new place and could be suffering from homesickness. Trust me, it can suck if it's not taken care of. I just need a shower." Izuku told her, "A cold shower." Alright, you don't look sick," Rumi replied, stepping back and getting off the back, allowing Izuku to breathe again and have the BLD in his body disperse again. "Anyways, my dad wanted me to wake you up. He doesn't want it to be a habit for you to wake up late, at least until after training starts." "Thank you. It's whatever." "Come on, we got some breakfast," she told him, walking out the room. Before she was gone, Izuku called out, "I'll be there, just gotta take care of something." When she was out of sight, he sighed, "I gotta learn how to wake up better. She's going to think I'm a psycho if I keep on waking up like this." With the peace he had, he looked out the window to think. Here he was, waking up into his whole life. He has so much to learn and so much to do ahead of him. It's both intimidating and exciting. But that was the choice he made for himself. He got alive by it. "I should text my mom to let her know that I slept fine," he thought, pulling out his phone. He had texted her the night before to let her know that he settled in okay and had promised to text her when he had woken up. His jaw almost burst through the ground from how strong it dropped when he saw he had 4 missed FaceTime requests, 20 phone calls, and 45 text messages, all from his mother. "Oh dear Lord Jesus," Izuku mumbled under his breath as he went through each message she sent. It got worse the more he searched through. By the end of it, she straight up thinks he's dead now. He instantly went to call her before this goes any further. When she finally answered, he was met with the sobbing voice he expected. "Aye, Izuku. Hey mom. Just woke up and saw your message. Waahhh. Mom, you should be at work by now. You sure you should be crying?" Despite the crying bit, Izuku still appreciates that he can enjoy some of the lingering aspects of his old life.